Evening all.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. It's 6:30 on Thursday, the 18th of March, 2021, and we are commencing the meeting of the full council at Basingstoke-on-Deane. I'm Councillor Diane Taylor, Mayor of Basingstoke-on-Deane, and I will be chairing this meeting. Welcome to all councillors, participants and viewers to this council meeting, which is being held in accordance with the council's rules for virtual meetings, which in turn reflect the government's published regulations. This meeting is being streamed live on YouTube and will also be available to view after the meeting has finished. The usual points of procedure just to note: councillors who wish to speak should use the raised hand button if possible and switch this off when they've spoken. Councillors may interrupt without using the raised hand button only if they have a point of order or a point of personal explanation. If an issue seems to be broadly supported, I may call for hands to be raised if there is dissent on a subject. If hands are raised, then we will go to a debate and vote. If no hands are raised, and I will give plenty of time, I will take it that we are agreed without a need to debate. Can councillors ensure, please, that their mobile phones are now switched off or are on silent, along with any other devices that could interfere with the proceedings? Councillors should turn their video link on during the meeting and keep their microphones muted unless I've invited them to speak. Councillors are reminded that if they switch off their video link or move away from the camera, they will be treated as leaving the meeting and will not be able to take part in any vote on the item under discussion. If councillors have any IT problems, please contact the Democratic Service Officer and she'll sort you out. Voting will be taken by a roll call. Officers present will only switch their video link on during the proceedings when they are presenting or where they wish to be invited to speak by the chair. I'll confirm the name of any visiting speakers at the appropriate time in the agenda and invite them to speak via audio and visual link. Right, now, as is customary, may I invite the Mayor's Chaplain, Dr. Andy Taylor, to say a few words and pray. Councillors who do not wish to take part in this item may, of course, switch off their sound. Andy.
Good evening. And may I say right at the beginning, thank you very much to all of you for sitting so patiently through my various ramblings at the beginning of council meetings over the past couple of years. Over those times, I've sort of tried to sort of see how, you know, in my faith and my walk in Christ, how I've learned the principles of God are so different from some of the principles that we see around us so often. And I think we know them to be true in things like the first shall be last, he who be greatest amongst you must be servant of all, humble yourself, all these sort of things which are all part of God's way of doing things, and yet so hard for us to follow. I thought tonight I would just read something out of the book of Philippians. This is Philippians chapter 2, and it says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves. Each of you should look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. Your attitude should be the same as that of Christ Jesus, who, being in the very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be held on to, but made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. We just pray. Father God, I just want to bring every member of this council, the elected members and the officers, and bring them with thanksgiving to you, Lord. Thank you for their service to our town. And Father, we just pray a blessing on them. We particularly pray a blessing on those for whom this may be their last council meeting because they're retiring. We pray, Lord, that they will prosper in whatever they do. And in fact, Lord, I like to pray for our town, that you would pour out your blessing on our town, pour out your blessing on our businesses, on our schools, on our health service, on our fire service, on our police, and upon the many, many people who go about their daily work, Lord. We pray that you would look favourably on this town, this borough of Basingstoke, and that, Lord, you would release a blessing that will be so good that this town will flourish. So, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Andy. Thank you very much. Could I just ask Councillor Jones, you have your hand raised. Do you want to say something? Can you unmute first, Tony? Tony, you're muted.
Sorry, I've lost everything on my screen other than your picture and you talking to me. So I was trying to get hold of it. Trying to get hold of someone to let me back in or whatever I've done wrong. I don't know. It's a new laptop and it's different than the last one. I shouldn't have fiddled. I will try again. I'm around. I can hear everything, but you'll have to
okay, thank you. Maybe a Democratic Service officer could get in touch with you and help you through that.
Yeah, if they would, give me a ring. And
so
I can't get hold of anybody. I'm just trying now. Thank you.
You want to see us all, don't you? Very good. Thank you. Right. The first item on the agenda then is to receive apologies for absence. I've received apologies from councillors Grant, Keating, Freeman and Golding. And I believe Councillor Godison isn't able to be with us either. Anybody else? Councillor McCormick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm delighted to report that Councillor Angie Freeman is actually here, as is Councillor Ruth Cooper after her period of long COVID.
Thank you, that's good news. So I rescind what I just said about Councillor Freeman. Welcome, Councillor Freeman, and special welcome also to Councillor Cooper after all this time. So pleased you can make it. Brilliant. Are there any other apologies for absence? Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Capon won't be with us tonight, and obviously add to Councillor Golding and Councillor Godison. So thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Cousins will be attending the meeting late, and can I extend my welcome to Councillor Cooper, and great to see her back at the meeting. Great to see her back.
Thank you. Yes, applause all round there. No other news of absentees. Okay, in that case, we'll move on to declarations of interest. I have a hand raised for Councillor Phillimore.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Agenda item 16 mentions Basingstoke Town Football Club, of which I am a board member.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wooldridge.
Agenda item 17 mentions Sovereign Housing Association, who I work for. So I've got personal interest there, so I'm not going to participate or vote on that agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Putty.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's again Sovereign Housing Association. I used to be a trustee there, so maybe I should declare my interest.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Eaches.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It was just because the football club was mentioned. If that's mentioned, then I'd have to declare a pecuniary interest in that, simply because of my day job and the job that I do. So if that came up, I'd have to switch my camera off and not be involved.
Thank you, councillors. If I may just leave it to you to take the appropriate action at the appropriate time, and perhaps keep an eye on the screen so that you can come back with us when you're able. I'll leave that to you. Thank you very much, all of you. The next item 3 on the agenda is the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of February last month. These are not yet completed and will be approved at our next normal council meeting on the 27th of May. Moving on to announcements. I'd just like to say, as everyone is aware, this is the last ordinary council meeting of this municipal year, and so will be the final meeting for those councillors who are retiring and not seeking re-election. I don't have all their names, I don't know who they all are, so I won't name them, but I know that there will be some familiar faces missing from subsequent meetings, and I just want to say you will be missed. We want to say a warm goodbye to you all, and as soon as we're back in the council chamber, we will be presenting service certificates. Please do come to receive these so we can thank you properly and appreciate your service to this council. So, big day for some of you. Does the Chief Executive or Leader have any announcements to make? Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Further to last month's question to me from Alex Lee on the basis of a Labour motion on the provisions of help assistance to ex-servicemen who wish to continue to live in this country. I can confirm that letters have been written to the ministers and I await reply, and as soon as those are back with me, those replies, I will obviously update council on those replies and where ministers expect help to be given to ex-servicemen who we all relish and cherish. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just before we proceed to the main items on the agenda, just a word about timings. It won't have escaped your notice that there is potential for this meeting to go on very late. There are 6 motions, and those alone could take up 35 minutes or more each if all the speaking time is used. So 6 motions could occupy us for 3.5 hours, although I'm sure that won't happen. quite sure. I would very much like to get through it all, as the next ordinary meeting isn't until the 27th of May, with new councillors, etc., present, and some of our present ones missing. That's after the election and the mayor making. However, equally, I don't want to limit a good, necessary debate on a vital issue. So can I leave it to your discretion, councillors, as you enter the debates? There's quite a bit of overlap of subjects on the agenda, especially around green issues. And so can we just guard against too much repetition? As always, I'll be looking out for consensus so we can avoid any unnecessary votes. So the agenda allows for the 3 motions carried over from last month's meeting to be dealt with first, followed by 4, I think, fairly straightforward recommendations. And we'll then hopefully get through the 3 new motions with good, meaningful debates. We will probably take a short break at around 8:45, unless the meeting's finished by then, of course, who knows? And I will review where we have got to after that. Okay, so it's up to you how long we go on, basically, is what I'm saying. So let's go on to item number 5 on the agenda, which is questions from members of the public. And we have received notice of 4 questions. So first of all, Mr. Beavers, welcome to you. Would you ask your question, please?
Can you hear me, Madam Mayor?
Hello, Mr. Beavers. Yes, we can hear you. We can't see you, but we can hear you. So please go ahead.
Right, okay, thank you. Most councillors will be aware of Basingstoke's place in the Hampshire Downs and the environmental and ecological opportunity it presents, confirmed by Natural England. In order to protect and reconnect more of this landscape and restore nature, between the South Downs National Park and the North Wessex area of outstanding natural beauty, will the relevant portfolio holder respond to, support and refer to committee this request to explore further designation of the Hampshire Downs as an area of outstanding natural beauty? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beavers. This one I think must be for Councillor Raffel. Councillor Raffel.
Madam Mayor, can I thank Mr. Beavers for his timely question? He and others have been requesting that we look at the status of the North Hampshire Downs and other areas in the borough for some significant time. And his question is timely because we have a motion that looks at designation. And as Mr. Beavers knows, Madam Mayor, designation comes in different shapes and sizes. It doesn't necessarily have to be an AONB, it can be other forms as well. And the motion that the council will be discussing later will be to look at all the valued landscapes around the borough, to the north and to the east, as well as to the south, and whether they should be given some form of protection. But it aims for that discussion to take place at EPH. And I want EPH to discuss how we can support neighbourhood planning for our villages by giving a greater level of protection to the precious landscapes that lie beyond them. And this applies equally to Sherfield as it does to Sherburn St John, to Pamber as much as it does to Preston Candover, to Bradley as it does to Bramley. So, Mr. Beavers, can I thank him through you, Madam Mayor, for his question. And it's up to members tonight to decide whether they wish that topic to be discussed further, whatever the outcome of that discussion at EPH.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Beavers, obviously Councillor Raffel is onto this. Do you have a supplementary, or will you just listen to
No, I'd like to pose a supplementary, please.
Okay.
Would the portfolio holder agree that the scope of the nature recovery network, which is included in the motion, must include all of the Hampshire Downs, all of the borough, especially southwest of Basingstoke, and urban as well as rural areas? Thank you.
Councillor Raffel.
Well, Madam Mayor, I'd like to answer that question by saying it's too difficult for me to answer. I think that is entirely within the the ambit of the EPH committee to consider that once it understands its full implications. But I am keen for the area of nature recovery areas to be defined, not to be nebulous, and for them to be large. and not inconsequential. And they're probably the only two broad things that I wish to say about it, aside from the fact I want to see them all round the borough, not just in one particular area. I want to see them to the north, I want to see them to the east and to the south. Bear in mind, of course, the excellent work that is already being done to the northwest by the AONB that's in place there.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Beavers. Please do listen to the debate. It's nice to see you again. Question number 2 is from Francesca Merritt.
Mayor, can I request under 11.9 that question goes to environment so it can actually be discussed under 11.9 of the Constitution?
You may request it. Thank you. That is noted. Ms. Maritan, would you like to put your question, please, to Councillor Rattigan? Are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. I'm asking on behalf of the residents of Broadhurst Grove, what is the council's plan and timescale for a permanent solution to the pieces of land across the borough where the original S52 notices have not been enforced, which has resulted in the case of Broadhurst Grove, land changing hands in rapid succession and putting the village green pocket park status at risk?
Thank you very much. Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you very much for the question. And just to give council some reassurance, this is important to the administration. I visited Broadhurst Grove on Sunday to look at the pocket park, the greens, to get a feel for what the residents' value on that is. I spoke to Mrs. Moore, who I know is a resident there, straight after. She wasn't in, but I was at her house and put a card through the door. So this is a very important issue to us, and one I know my colleagues, such as Deputy Mayor Councillor Mrs. Cubitt, have been on at me, and Sven Goddison, and as well Councillor Raffel, have all come back to me and asked me what I can do about it. Well, firstly, I spoke to the Chief Executive on Monday, and we are setting up a task force to not just review this individual case, but as the questioner has pointed out, there are probably a number of S52 notices across the borough, and to review them properly to give some standing and some status to them in our world. Just to say that open space, of course, is protected under policy EM5. The green infrastructure adopted in the local plan that we are currently running, and the policy seeks to protect and enhance the quality and extent of both private and public open space. So we cherish it, but of course, sometimes things slip through the net. And although the S52 in this case is over 40 years old, it is beholden upon us as a council to protect those open spaces where we have a responsibility. So I assure the questioner that we will do everything in our power to ensure that there is proper land management and that it is designated properly, and not allow another period of worry and distress to befall other communities across the borough.
Thank you very much. Ms. Meriton, do you have any supplementary question, or is that okay?
It's good to hear about the task force being established. What action can be made which will provide the safeguards for the land to be correctly placed into the ownership of the council as planned, and prevent future purchasers losing significant amounts of money purchasing something which technically they're unable to own?
I accept that it is important in that, and therefore we will be trawling through to make sure that every piece of land that has an S52 on it is properly accounted for, and therefore we will be able to go back to residents and offer opportunities for the protection of that land without the worry of having to think who is buying it next. So we can report back to you through local councillors to tell you what we've done and why we've done it and how we've done it to protect you in the long term. I hope that is acceptable.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, both of you. That's fine. Before I move on, Councillor Jane Frankham, you have your hand up. Is this to second Councillor Frankham's request?
Yes, it is. It needs to be seconded and voted on to make it formal. Otherwise, it counts for nothing, as in the Constitution.
I understand that in the Constitution, it just needs to be voted and seconded.
Unvoted. Unvoted. Sorry.
Oh no, I've been told differently. Okay. If anybody is unhappy with the prospect of that issue going to EPH, could you raise your hand, and we will have to go to a vote. Okay, thank you. I see.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
All hands have disappeared. So thank you, Councillor Frank. I'm sorry I didn't get it seconded and voted on immediately, but that is now established and it'll be minuted. Thank you very much. We move on to question number 3. Mr. Martin Heath. Mr. Heath, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much. Would you like to put your question?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I'll try and paraphrase because this is, as you say, a lot on the agenda. I spoke to ask questions about item 10 last time on eco-housing. This time I want to ask a question on item 11, the climate emergency, but I also noticed on item 17, you're talking about housing conversion as well. Now, each of these are issues that are inextricably linked. As I said in my question, in Basingstoke, we've got some great plans, but we are beginning to get impaled in a bit of a dilemma. We've got this laudable aim of being carbon neutral by 2030, but at the same time, we want to grow our borough. We want to build thousands of homes, invest in new industries, attract new jobs, and build thousands of new homes. These sort of objectives are becoming mutually incompatible. The existing homes and buildings in our borough generate millions, 1.3 million tonnes of greenhouse gases each and every year. And if we're going to reduce that to 0 by 2030, then we're going to have to reduce those carbon emissions by 140, 150,000 tonnes every single year. But at the same time, grow our borough. And unless we start building every single new home as being carbon neutral, every single warehouse block, every single hotel, unless we retrofit the existing buildings to make them carbon neutral, and if we don't massively improve the transport emissions, and if we don't replace every single gas boiler in the borough, and invest in renewable energy at the same time, we're just not going to be able to achieve those aims. Now, the climate strategy document that we've got before you tonight is a good document. It's a good start, but it fails to address many of those issues. It doesn't talk about how we're going to retrofit all of our homes. It doesn't talk about how we're going to mandate every single building to be 0 carbon. It doesn't talk about how we're going to do the same for our offices and warehouses. It doesn't mention how we're going to have to revolutionise our transport systems and transform the way we create and handle waste and grow our food and manage our land. So if we have the question really to the portfolio holders is, if our strategy is not talking about those particular issues, how are we going to get to 2030 and a carbon neutral borough? Thank you.
Thank you very much. This one for Councillor Eachus, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Martin, for your question. We have recently met this week with officers, and I take all these issues very seriously. And firstly, I want to agree with you on a number of the points you've raised in the statement. We have ourselves very ambitious targets here in the borough, particularly around reaching net 0 carbon as a council by 2025 and a net 0 carbon borough by 2030. The topics you've raised set out the scale of challenges in front of us and the key areas that we have to address. And I agree that these are the key areas to address. I do question your point about the strategy being silent on most of these points. In fact, I consider they are captured within the areas of focus set out in the strategy, such as buildings or transport. But you have to remember the strategy sets out a framework for action moving forward. It's not going to capture absolutely everything. There'll be further details set out in accompanying action plans, and we have to acknowledge that this will be a living document and so will be updated annually, as well as reporting on the progress against the actions included. Some actions set out already address your points raised, such as an update to the local plan, which will set the policy for new development in the borough, which you dealt with a lot in your question, whereas we acknowledge that other actions will require further development. In tackling these big issues, we should acknowledge that there is an increase in national policy and support for this work. As a council, we have a vital role in connecting national policy and support with local action, maximising available opportunities while seeking to understand how to bridge the gaps where these exist. The ambitions set out within this strategy will not be delivered without support and collaboration across the borough and beyond. So we look forward to continuing to work with yourselves and others in implementing this strategy.
Thank you very much. Mr. Heath, do you have a brief supplementary?
No, you've got a lot to get through tonight. And as Councillor Each has said, that we have met earlier on and we've covered quite a lot of the ground there. So I'll let you guys get on with your busy agenda.
Thank you very much. Thank you, much appreciated. Thank you. And finally, we welcome Sheila Peacock. Hello, Sheila. Could you ask your question, please?
Hello. Thank you very much for having me. Yes, please. What is the council going to do to encourage Build Back Better? That is to encourage new startups in industry and commerce in the borough that contribute to carbon reduction locally and nationally. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. That one I think is for Councillor Rattigan, is it?
It is. Thank you very much, because economic recovery sits with myself. So thank you, Sheila, as always. A good question and one that's to the point. Firstly, I attend meetings that mean that we are deeply involved in the economic recovery piece. I was with EM3 this morning and BASP this afternoon to outline our hopes for a greener recovery. The fact that we are committing £2 million both to the climate change emergency funding and with that money that will go to the economic recovery, £1 million to each of them, means that we are financially committed. But as you rightly say, we need to do more than that. So what we are trying to achieve is a healthier, better, greener economy in everything that we do. And I think there has been a fundamental change post-COVID. People have realised that reliance on the car is not as great as it was, an ability to work from home, to not have to travel to where you need to be. And part of what we discussed today was that shortening of supply chains. Why should some PPE have to come all the way from China? Wouldn't it be better if we had a manufacturing base here in the UK and then didn't have to transport issues that bringing stuff halfway around the world was required? So there is a lot we can do. And of course, it is a tightrope. We've got to walk carefully to make sure that economic recovery doesn't come at any cost, and certainly doesn't come at the cost of our environment or our health and well-being or our climate. So we will rise to those green challenges, and we will make sure through a series of reviews, both in this council and more widely, that what are we doing with our money and how are we making sure that the economy that comes back is greener than the one that we left pre-COVID. Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you very much. Sheila, do you have a supplementary question?
No, thank you. But I appreciate Councillor Rattigan's full reply to my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you. So those are the questions dealt with. We now move on to item number 6, which is petitions. You'll see from the update sheet that there are now no petitions to be presented. So we move on to item number 7, resignations and appointments. At this stage, I'm not expecting any, but I'm simply looking for raised hands if there are any proposed changes to any committees or outside bodies. Any raised hands, please. No, as I thought. Okay. Obviously, there'll be plenty to go on in our selection meeting. Right. The next deal with the 3 motions that were deferred from our meeting of 3 weeks ago. And the first one, item 8 on the agenda, is to do with building fire safety. This is on the update paper with minor alterations as shown. Councillor Frost, would you like to propose this?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I would like to propose it as it's written in the paper.
Thank you very much. Do you want to speak to it at all?
Yes, please. Madam Mayor and councillors, it's now 4 years since the terrible fire and loss of 72 lives at Grenfell, in which flammable cladding caught fire. And it's 2 years since the fire at student accommodation at the Cube in Bolton, where again flammable cladding caught fire. Fortunately, in the second case, all 217 people escaped without serious injury. According to the Association of Residential Managing Agents, or ARMA, there are a possible 11,760 dangerous buildings nationally in the UK, with just 216 buildings having been fixed since Grenfell. That's just 1.836% of dangerous buildings being fixed in 4 years. And several of those buildings in our borough, which are on the tall building register, have also failed their fire safety inspections. Though I have been reassured by officers that there are no residents at risk due to the various procedures that have been put in place by building freeholders, such as waking watches, amongst others. I don't know about anybody else, but I thought the national government had set up a fund with an overall pot of circa £5 million, which would ensure that leaseholders in high-rise buildings would not have to pay to replace unsafe flammable cladding similar to that used in Grenfell. However, it now appears that inspections conducted in the wake of Grenfell have identified other safety defects, such as timber buildings, missing fire breaks, and unlinked fire alarms. These faults are excluded from the government fund, and the Housing Ministry have inserted a contract clause that says leaseholders cannot claim aid for cladding repairs without proving they have sufficient funding to complete works on all the safety defects. ARMA says that the average cost per flat of replacing unsafe cladding is in the region of £22,500, with another £25,600 bill to cover the costs of safety defects such as fire breaks, linking fire alarms through the building, etc. I don't know about anybody else in this chamber, but the only way I could afford that to raise that sort of money would be to remortgage. However, since the 1st of December 2019, in order to sell or remortgage a flat, a resident needs to obtain an EWS1 form, External Wall System Form number 1. And this form is effectively a fire safety certificate, which gives mortgage companies peace of mind to loan against. In the last few weeks, I had been contacted by a resident of Crown Heights, a luxury development of flats, who advised me that her EWS1 form classified her building as B2 due to the flammable cladding, no fire breaks, and unlinked fire alarms, which has rendered her and her husband's flat as worthless. They cannot sell and they cannot remortgage to cover the cost of repairs. However, thankfully, as I understand it, from April the 5th of this year, EWS1 forms will not be required by mortgage lenders in order to sell flats in tall buildings or to remortgage, thankfully. Firstport, the building owner in Crown Heights, in order to keep the residents safe, have instigated a 24/7 waking watch, which checks on residents every 15 minutes until remedial works are completed. This currently costs a staggering £6,500 a week, or £26,000 a month, and Firstport expects this cost to be borne by leaseholders. Currently, as I understand it from residents, Firstport have only recently instigated an invasive survey of the building to understand the enormity of the works, replacing the external cladding, installing the correct fire breaks, and linking fire alarms, and are getting quotes. All this 4 years after Grenfell. This is just not good enough. This really is just not good enough. We need to see that action is being taken, and our residents need to see that action is being taken. I, for one, do not want to have the next Grenfell or the next Cube to happen in our borough. So what do I want? And I hope you want this too. I want the council to work with the fire service to identify all tall buildings in the borough and apply significant pressure on the buildings owners to undertake the relevant fire surveys as a matter of urgency. I do not want a Grenfell event happening in this borough. I also want us to communicate with the owners of the building's freehold, making it clear that the council...
Sorry, Councillor Frost, we're running out of a little bit of time with this introduction. Could you scoot through it a bit? We've got another...
Yeah, I will do, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much. Okay, I want us to communicate with the owners of the building's freehold, making clear that the council's expectation is that they urgently publish a clear timetable for residents, detailing the remedial actions needed and associated issues, along with timeframes to enable their buildings to meet the current fire safety regulations. And more importantly, that these costs are not passed on to residents. It is the freeholders' building, and they should pay for the cost of remedial actions to keep our residents and their leaseholders safe. Madam Mayor, as you may be aware, that the Smith-McParlin amendment to the Fire Safety Bill fell at the House, and I would like the Cabinet Member for Housing to write to our local MPs asking for their support, lobbying government, asking for the costs of remedial work are met by building owners and not passed on to residents. I also request that the Cabinet Member also write to Her Majesty's Government requesting clarity on the availability of all building safety funding schemes for Crown Heights and the other tall buildings affected in the borough of Basingstoke-on-Dean. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank Councillor Cousins for his comments on the front page article in last week's Gazette, laying out the groundwork behind this motion, which has been carried over and updated from the last council meeting on the 25th of February. And I look forward to his support for this motion. Finally, I want this motion to be sent to EPH committee so we can receive regular progress reports and task force updates. I urge all members to support this motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Frost. Now, Councillor Miller, you're seconding this. Would you like to second it now and speak or defer?
Second the motion, Madam Mayor. Thank you. I would like to speak now and I will be brief.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm seconding the motion to highlight the importance of injecting urgency into the resolution of this disgraceful saga of unsafe high-rise accommodation. The issue of poor or inadequate building standards relating to fire regulations being applied are inexcusable, and it begs the question as to what authority was responsible for ensuring that the construction of these buildings was according to those regulations. The accommodation at Crown Heights was constructed between 2001 and 2003, and the development company elected to use the National House Building Control standards instead of the BDBC Building Control Department. By employing NHBC for this purpose, BDBC was kept out of the loop as far as having access to any detailed plans of the structure and of the materials employed, and that is the status today. The fact that sitting tenants and leaseholders are faced with increased charges for the provision of ad hoc safety measures and confirmed by the EWS1 survey demonstrates that the building is fire unsafe until a permanent solution is implemented. These occupiers put their trust in the builders of Crown Heights and thousands of other similar structures across the UK, and they should not be penalised for inadequate and, in this context, dangerous structural deficiencies relating to fire safety. For local authorities to be involved in future construction of similar structures, there is a case, I believe, for either full transparency by third-party building control organisations or the assurance role being undertaken by those authorities. I commend this motion to the Council. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Miller. We have two speakers. Councillor McCormick first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Frost as well. We did have some various calls and correspondence in trying to shape this motion. It's very heartening to see the anticipated level of support for it. Picking up on Councillor Miller's points, the NHBC regulations, if anyone's seen them, they are, I would say, obfuscatory in their nature, very difficult to interpret, arguably not fit for purpose, have been overdue reform for many years. And I think there are people in the construction industry who need holding to account. We did toy with the idea of putting some more concrete sort of clauses in the motion about making sure that there were progress. We didn't have the confidence that as a council it was within our gift to do that. I think the crucial thing with this is going to be primary legislation. And I really do hope, we have seen quotes in the press from our MP saying that she's working with residents, and I sincerely hope that that is translated into support in the House of Commons, in the division lobby. And it needs to happen with the greatest urgency. 4 years after Grenfell, 72 lives lost. There were previous fires, a whole series of them going back over quite a few years with fatalities. And yet we still haven't put in place any lessons learned. This is the biggest crisis that we have had in housing in living memory. In some ways, it's worse than the crisis that we had at the end of the Second World War, when we had large numbers of houses bombed and people in need of new build. It is worse than the 60s and 70s blocks of flats, many of which we've had to demolish for various reasons. We have got people who are not able to feel safe in their own homes due to fire issues. We have deficiencies that have not been addressed. It is completely unfair. I wholeheartedly agree with everything that's been said tonight, to expect a leaseholder or a tenant to foot the bill for a building when it's clearly the responsibility of the freeholder for that building. And these people are trapped through no fault of their own in properties that they cannot sell, cannot raise mortgages on. And something needs to happen, and it needs to happen fast, because I don't think it's fair on anyone to have lived for 4 years of this and be currently looking at having no end in sight of it. And just one informative thing for members, you may not have had time to see, there is a very useful article published in the Gazette Online today that mentions the status of various high-rise buildings in the town, and it has stated that Crown Heights failed its EWS1 certificate. Some concerns about Victory Hill, but the top 2 floors apparently are being fixed on that. And some concerns also about Skyline Plaza, which has obtained an EWS1 form, but there are concerns raised about aspects of the building. And I have to say, well, we did have a briefing shortly after Grenfell. That was the building that worried me, Skyline Plaza, because it manifestly has cladding on it. So I will be brief. I will let others speak and others vote, but you have my wholehearted support on that. And I know that I've had members and candidates that have been approached by residents on this as well. It is a big problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I note that Councillor Gardner says that the article is already in the print edition as well. The next speaker, Councillor Tristan Robinson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As Cabinet Member for Homes and Families, I welcome this motion, and I'd like to thank Councillor Frost and Miller for their work in putting this together. I would just say I actually had a meeting with the Crown Heights Residents Association at 5:30 this evening, and that was why I was a couple of moments late to this meeting. It's an incredibly productive meeting, and I'd like to thank the residents there for banding together and working hard on these issues. I'm pleased from what Councillor McCormick said that he welcomed that table in the Basingstoke Gazette with that further information in, which is important because the team and I provided that to them earlier in the week. Overall, since a number of residents at Crown Heights approached me at the end of January, the council set up a fire safety task force, bringing together housing standards, building control, legal, comms, and Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service, amongst others, to work on this issue. We've been using technical expertise alongside other organisations to confirm that appropriate action is taking place to mitigate the risks in liaison with the fire service. We are absolutely clear that enforcement action is on the table, but fortunately, partners are working collaboratively at present, and the management companies responsible are taking action to mitigate the issues at play. With regard to Crown Heights, an alarm system is being installed currently and is on track to complete that installation before Easter, and this will negate the need for a waking watch. The wider remediation will then progress thereafter, and First Port have secured government funding of approximately £5.5 million to replace the external render system. With regards to Winterthur Way, work has started to install the fire alarm, and this is scheduled to complete by the end of April, at which time the need for a waking watch will cease. The cost for the alarm is £56,000 and will be met by the Waking Watch Fund set up by central government. The wider remediation on that block to remove the cladding on the small number of penthouses which is affected is estimated to start in May of this year and will take 9 to 12 months to complete. We are not currently aware of any other buildings over or indeed under 18 metres tall that have failed an EWS1 test currently. However, we continue to monitor all residential blocks around the borough, and officers are undertaking detailed work into this. The most important thing is for residents to be reassured, despite some alarmist reports of late. Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service have confirmed that buildings are safe, with the mitigation in place as agreed, and the council's housing team are on hand to give specialist support and advice to any individuals, any residents who are concerned about their housing needs as a result of this situation, and we would certainly encourage them to get in contact with the team. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I agree with all the comments that have been passed already? I don't wish to repeat them in any way, but can I add 2 fresh points? Firstly, can I thank Vivid and just say Vivid's response in recent times to this issue has been important, and particularly to us in Northern in terms of Oakridge Towers. But it's beyond that. It's just the importance of taking the issue as seriously as it should be taken. And that should be said about a partner in terms of the way they've approached this. And we will continue to work with them in regard to any issues associated. And I did note in the article that Oakridge Towers was listed. I did note in the article that Mr. Chun from Vivid gave a clear indication of what work they've been doing. And I think that's just important to put that on record from a partner. Can I also raise the separate issue of permitted development? Because it isn't just new build flats that we are seeing in this issue. It's also the standards associated with permitted development and conversion of blocks of offices into flats. And I think that's an important point to put on this debate, that if the national debate is talking about all of those important issues that have been raised by others, it should not forget the issue of permitted development and what is allowed and not allowed in regard to building control and building standards in permitted development when we see large office blocks converted into flats. And that concerns me, and I would want to see that part of this debate as well. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gavin James.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, I won't add to what's been already said in terms of all the comments I totally agree with. Obviously, it sits in my ward. I actually want to, unusually for a council meeting just before an election, I want to thank the portfolio holder for his efforts in communicating with residents and keeping me informed. It's really appreciated that he stepped straight in there and started working straight away, and also I think possibly dragged Maria Miller out of whatever she was doing into this saga. And she has been a voice in Parliament, perhaps not voted the way we'd like in terms of the amendment, but certainly she has been trying to pull some strings. So that's greatly appreciated as well. The frustration is the Residents Association isn't really a residents association. It's not accepted by the owners of the property, because so many letted properties that any residents association to be accepted has to have a certain percentage of the residents or homeowners members of it, and of course a lot of them are leased, so that's a sense of frustration which we've got some more time to sort out. But I say I totally support the motion. I think it's very important that we keep an eye on this, and again I'll just thank the portfolio holder for his efforts, which have been considerable in addressing this issue.
Thank you very much. That's good to hear. Our last speaker is Councillor Putty.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Actually, I am going to be fairly short. And I agree with everything that's been said, and I welcome this motion very much. I wonder how many of us remember the big fire that we had at Barclays Mercantile. That was not many years ago, but I would say some years ago. But I wonder how many of us do remember that. And I'd like to pay tribute to one of my colleague friend who was a divisional fire chief officer in Basingstoke, Mr. Malcolm Whitehouse. And he actually was affected by that particular fire at Barclays Mercantile Building. And he passed away some years ago. And I really feel very sad for him. He was a very good friend of mine. And I just wanted to pay tribute to him. And this actually brings me to really say that not only we have to look at what the government can do for buildings, high-rise or tall buildings in the borough and everywhere else in UK, but also provide proper equipments for the fire service people, because they need it as well. So this is all, and I welcome this motion. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. That's all the speakers. Councillor Frost, have you got just a few short words of summing up?
Not really.
That's all right then.
I think all the comments tonight speak for themselves.
Okay, that's brilliant. It's been a good debate. I'm sensing unanimity, but I'm not taking that for granted. So could I ask if anybody has any dissent at all on this, and we need to go to a vote, could you raise your hand? And I'll just give a few seconds for that to happen. Thank you very much. We will take that motion now as carried. And thank you, Councillor Frost and Miller, for bringing it. Thank you. Moving on to item 9, which is the second deferred motion regarding support for the Climate and Ecological Emergency Bill. Can I ask Councillor Konietzko, please, to introduce and propose?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm hoping that at least some of us will be familiar with the concept of the cosmic calendar. And the idea here is that you try to compress our planet's 4.5 billion year history into 365 days. So the Earth will be created 1 second past midnight on the 1st of January. And around about now, at the beginning of spring, we'd see the very first signs of life start to appear as the most primitive single-cell organisms. And it will take another 6 months until around the middle of August for the first multicellular life to emerge. Insects wouldn't arrive until about the 24th of November, and the first mammals wouldn't be born until the 13th of December. The dinosaurs would die out on Boxing Day. Homo sapiens, our species, wouldn't begin to emerge until 11:36 p.m. on New Year's Eve. The Industrial Revolution would start at 11:59 and 58 seconds. So when you consider the history of our planet in its entirety, it's quite clear that we, humans, have barely figured in it at all. Yet in those few minutes that we've been here on Earth, we've completely transformed it. A lot of that change has been positive. We've created medicine, science, culture, sport, democracy, which is the reason why we're all here tonight. Not bad for 25 minutes work, but we've also shaped our planet in more harmful ways. Thanks largely to us, the Earth's ecological balance is being threatened and global temperatures have risen by 1 degree from pre-industrial levels just 2 seconds ago on our cosmic calendar. That increase in temperatures might not sound like much, but we all know that its consequences for our planet and for humanity are likely to be severe and potentially catastrophic. And that's why we unanimously declared a climate emergency as a council back in 2019. The Climate and Ecological Emergency Bill, which is currently making its way through Parliament, aims to take this positive action much further and onto a bigger stage. As we'll hear later, we're making plans as a borough to cut back on our CO2 emissions. That's encouraging, but it can't be left to forward-thinking local authorities like ours to solve the problem alone. It's not enough. The Committee on Climate Change, which some of you may know is an independent body that advises the government on global warming, has set 24 key indicators to measure progress against our national carbon reduction targets. In its 2019 report, it concluded that the UK was on track to meet only 7 of these indicators, 7 out of 24. Just today, the government has cut grants for electric car buyers from £3,000 to £2,500, while at the same time freezing fuel duty in the budget. This is exactly why we need to do more. We need an ambitious national framework that reflects the scale of the challenges that we face. We also need a globally coordinated approach, one in which we as a country can take the lead. That's what the Climate and Ecological Emergency Bill aims to achieve. It recognises that time is running out and that we need to do more at a local, national and international level. It takes the same sense of urgency and pioneering spirit that we've channeled to tackle COVID-19, and it asks central government to make a real difference to the health of our planet. So amongst other things, very briefly, the bill will call for the UK to make and enact a serious plan. This means dealing with our real fair share of emissions so that we don't go over critical global rises in temperature. It asks for a commitment to the protection and conservation of nature, both here and overseas. And it seeks to give ordinary people a real say on the way forward. I'm sure you'll also have seen the important addition to this motion, which we tweaked ahead of the previous meeting, which asks us to prevent environmental protection policies from being watered down or reversed. And this is very much in keeping with the spirit and aims of the bill itself. This motion, Madam Mayor, is our chance to tell residents and government just how strongly we feel about tackling climate change and protecting our natural environment. It's our opportunity to make a positive difference. Protecting our planet is going to force us all to make some really difficult decisions, but supporting this motion is not one of them. I encourage everyone to show the same spirit that united us during the climate emergency debate 18 months ago and support this motion. And let's together make the next few seconds count. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. That was interesting and educational. Thank you. Councillor Hickling, would you like to second this and then either speak or defer?
Thanks, Mayor. Happy to second the motion and defer my comments. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So, Councillor Eachus.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Unfortunately, despite being the portfolio holder for the environment, I cannot support this motion. I don't at all play down climate change and the emergency that we find ourselves in. We've declared a climate emergency as a council, and I accept the importance of it. And it's something that we must all do to work together to tackle. It's clear from the work we're doing how important we find this, all of the resources we're putting into it. There's a paper later on the agenda about it. And we're also looking to put £2 million in the climate change reserve. So we are really taking this seriously, but we also have to be realistic. And that's what I want to really make the point of. And I just don't feel that this bill that's we're being asked to support is realistic. It will unnecessarily restrict us. We don't have the ability to do half of what it mentions if you look into the background of it. And I just think it sets unachievable aims. We have set our own demanding and ambitious targets, which we're doing all we can to achieve. We've already taken a number of important steps to reduce our emissions. And I appreciate this is just the start, but we just can't have a motion like this. We already are doing absolutely everything. And I think we need to put our efforts into supporting the climate change and air pollution strategy later on in the agenda. And in relation to the national side of things, you know, the government do seem to be doing all they can, increasing national policy and supporting things like climate change to move forward. So I'm afraid on the basis that it just doesn't seem achievable, I don't support this motion, but I do accept climate change is important. And as a council, we are taking that extremely seriously.
Thank you very much. Councillor McCormick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to support this motion. I did have some correspondence with Councillor Koniesko on it before it made it to the floor of the council chamber, a few slight tweaks. The concerns I have are we see evidence of some backtracking, not least with the reduction in the electric vehicle subsidy announced today. Now, I'm the owner of a hybrid vehicle and I would like to be an owner of a full electric vehicle, but electric vehicles are expensive. They're beyond the reach of a lot of people. And that needs primary legislation to change. But it looks like we're going in the wrong direction. There was an article in the New Scientist recently that said that all the savings that we've had in carbon emissions through the purchase of electric and hybrid vehicles have been more than offset by the increased take-up of SUT, sports utility vehicles, which burn more petrol and diesel. So there's evidence that in some sectors we're actually going backwards. And one of the other examples that I see is the government's removal of the ban on neonicotinoid insecticides that cause so much problems for our bee population. And let's be under no illusions, we need bees as critical pollinators. Up to 75% of our flowering plants, and many of our crops are included in that, would not be able to pollinate were it not for bees. And that could lead to some really serious implications in terms of our food supply going forward. So these are serious issues, and I think it's not really down to us to try and argue the finer points on what's the council doing, is it enough, we don't need this. This is a motion whose heart is in the right place, and we should all support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be supporting the motion and voting in favour of it, and I welcome the movers bringing it to the floor this evening. I think this is incredibly important for us as a borough, because it doesn't cut across what we're trying to do with the climate change strategy. It doesn't cut across all of the good things that have been said this evening by every councillor thus far on the environmental issues that face us, or for that matter, those residents that have come here this evening to ask questions of us, to push the agenda as hard as they are pushing us. I think this motion and this bill and what it seeks to do complements what we are trying to do. And every step we can take, every bit of policy, legislation that we can push and support that drives this agenda forward benefits not us. This isn't necessarily about us. As I said in my budget speech, this is about our young people and our children and their futures. Because if we don't grasp this nettle and do these things, we, by our lack of action, are condemning them to inherit our problems that we are creating in the environment. So we have a responsibility here to be as ambitious, as strong in leadership as we can be. And yes, this bill is ambitious. I have no doubt about what it's trying to achieve and do, but I'm behind it 100%. And I think it's a very important step to take. And I hope our MPs will be behind it. And I hope we don't come out thinking, in a sense of trying to find excuses of why we wouldn't support something like this. And I don't mean that in a negative way to what the cabinet member has said, but I mean in terms of each of us supporting, and the MPs for that matter in Westminster, supporting this agenda, because I think we all do. So I see this being really important. I note the amount of our native species that are being wiped out. I note what Councillor McCormick says and agree with him in the context of bees as just one example of how critical they are. But it's not just bees, it's a whole gamut of insects that are critical to our biodiversity. I listen to Paul Beaver's questions when he comes and talks about the importance of nature, the environment, to what we have in our borough. So unless we do these things, unless we embrace them, unless we try for them, then we are failing again, I think. And it isn't about our climate change strategy, because I get we'll debate that later. And it isn't about what we might do as an authority. It's about what we can do with others as well. And so I see this motion as being a massive step that we can try and push our MPs into taking and national policy into taking, that will make a big, big difference to all the young people and children in the future that need to see us doing it now, so that we are guaranteeing their futures, really. That's how important this is, I think.
Thank you very much. There are no more hands, so can I invite Councillor Hickling to speak as seconder, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the comments, and especially to Councillor Konechko for reminding us all of how urgent it is to continue taking positive steps towards tackling what will become catastrophic levels of heating within our environment. We could all potentially witness our beautiful planet become incompatible with any reasonable civilized community in the not too distant future. You may believe that we may be doing everything we can at the moment and that is enough. So why do we need to support such a motion? Well, even if we reach government's net zero targets by 2050, we are still gambling on an almost 50-50 chance that this will be enough. And considering what's at stake, this is not anything anyone should be prepared to gamble on. Quite simply, it's not good enough. To claim otherwise is simply putting the fate of our environment down to chance, and we need to be bolder. We need to take ownership, and we need to lead by continuing to take action and expressing the desire for such to whomever and whenever we can. Fortunately, as councillors, we are presented with opportunities such as this motion tonight, where we can have a meaningful and beneficial impact on the future of not just Basingstoke, but indeed globally. So in less than 10 years' time, when it becomes clear if our actions have been enough, each one of us can be that individual who is confident they did everything they could to support positive change. By supporting this motion, you are confirming your desire for further continued climate action and sending a clear message both locally and nationally that more must be done today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Koniesko, do you want to give a brief summing up?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And can I express my thanks to everyone who's contributed to the debate for this motion. I said in my introduction that tackling climate change is going to involve all of us making some uncomfortable choices. And it's precisely because these choices are so challenging, Madam Mayor, that we can't assume that we'll always get it right. And this is where the Climate Change and Ecological Emergency Bill comes in. It recognises that we need to be nudged, or maybe even in some cases shoved along to make the right decisions. And as we've heard over the past few minutes, it's clear that innovative, forward-thinking and joined-up climate change policies are needed if we're going to rescue our planet. That's why supporting the Climate and Ecological Emergency Bill is so important, Madam Mayor, and that's why I encourage my fellow councillors to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. So we'll now move to a vote on this motion. You can see the 5 points of the motion.
Madam Mayor, can I ask it to be a recorded vote?
Yes, there will be recorded automatically. Thank you. So what we'll do is I'll invite Fiona to call names in alphabetical order. And when your name is called, say for, against or abstain, as we usually do. If you could open your microphones and make sure you close them afterwards. Over to Fiona.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Ashfield.
For.
Councillor Bean.
Against.
Councillor Michael Bound.
For.
Councillor Simon Bound.
Against.
Councillor Carruthers.
Abstain.
Councillor Cooper. Councillor Cooper.
Support, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Cousins.
Councillor Cousins is attending late, Fiona.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councillor Cubitt.
For.
Councillor Eachus.
Against.
Councillor Edwards.
Against.
Councillor Faulkner.
Against.
Councillor Jane Frankham.
For.
Councillor Paul Frankham.
For.
Councillor Freeman.
For.
Councillor Frost.
Against.
Councillor Gardner.
Against.
Councillor Gaskell.
Against.
Councillor George.
For.
Councillor Harvey.
For.
Councillor Hickling.
For.
Councillor Hussey.
For.
Councillor Isaac.
Against.
Councillor Gavin James.
For.
Councillor Laura James.
For.
Councillor Koniesko.
For.
Councillor Kinnear.
Against.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Leeks.
Against.
Councillor Lovegrove.
For.
Councillor McCormick.
For.
Councillor McKay.
For.
Councillor Mahaffey.
Against.
Councillor Miller.
Against.
Councillor Phillimore.
For.
Councillor Potter.
For.
Councillor Putty.
Against.
Councillor Regan.
For.
Councillor Reid.
For.
Councillor Rattigan.
Against.
Councillor Nick Robinson.
For.
Councillor Tristan Robinson.
Against.
Councillor Raphael.
Against.
Councillor Sanders.
Against.
Councillor Still.
Against.
Councillor Diane Taylor.
For.
Councillor Kim Taylor.
For.
Councillor Mark Taylor.
For.
Councillor Tilbury.
For.
Councillor Tomlin.
For.
Councillor Vaux.
Against.
Councillor Watts.
For.
Councillor Janet Westbrook.
For.
Councillor Michael Westbrook.
For.
Councillor Wooldridge.
For.
Thank you. If you could just bear with me. Thank you. The result of the vote is for 32, against 20, and 1 abstention.
Thank you very much. So that motion is carried. We move now to item number 10 on the agenda, which is the final deferred motion, and it's about eco-housing. And can I invite Councillor Mackay to propose and explain? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Over a year ago, in December 2019, a few months after we declared a climate emergency, I was amongst other councillors and officers attending the Climate Emergency Summit organised by BASP, the Basingstoke Area Strategic Partnership. And the purpose of that interactive summit was to facilitate ideas and, most importantly, in my opinion, actions in support of our declared aim of a carbon neutral borough by 2030. A key outcome from the event, agreed in all corners of the room, was the importance of identifying a flagship development, a project that could demonstrate leadership and commitment on behalf of the council and its partners to the 2030 target. In fact, an example to inspire the community at large. According to our climate change and air quality strategy, now published in draft, over 25% of the borough carbon emissions relate to the heating and powering of homes. This is a significant contributor to our carbon emissions. We're the planning authority, so surely have some grip on the lever of powers when it comes to new house building. And significant new house building is planned in the borough, which presents an additional challenge, but also an opportunity to put our climate emergency response at the forefront of new development. The Manydown development alone includes plans for 3,400 homes, new homes. I'm indebted to my seconder tonight, Councillor Tomlin, for bringing the exemplar scheme at the Park Erin development in Wales to the attention of the Members' Advisory Panel on Climate Emergency. Park Erin is an actively managed development of 225 affordable eco-houses that are close to zero carbon. Each house has solar panels built in, hot water thermal storage, battery storage of electric power, deep borehole ground source heating, and 3-phase electrical power supplies for superfast electrical vehicle charging. These houses don't burn anything. They're truly houses for the 21st century. And by the way, they're very attractive and well laid out. And I'd really recommend all members to watch the online video about the Park Erin eco-housing at the link shown on the order paper. Please see for yourself and be inspired. The motion asks Cabinet to commit to undertake a detailed study of the Park Erin development and other exemplar schemes, and to report with recommendations as to how a similar or larger scale eco-house project could be realised within the developments now planned in the borough. Please support the motion. Let's provide an evidence base for an exemplar eco-housing project in this borough in support of our climate emergency response. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the seconder is Councillor Tomlin. I don't have any. Oh no, I have got one hand. Would you like to second and either speak or defer?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I'll second and speak now if you like. Thank you. Members, I've no hesitation in supporting Councillor McKay's motion. The climate change emergency declaration by this council that we all have signed up to needs to embrace the building of eco homes to be passive in standard and indeed aim to be carbon positive if we stand the remotest chance of achieving our goals by 2030. We have the chance with the Many Down standard to make this happen for at least 3,000 homes right now. And by way of our new local plan policies, we should be working with developers to understand why they won't deliver to these standards if they wish to build in Basingstoke and Deane. Our existing housing stock needs better insulation, more costly as a retrofit. Very soon, gas will no longer be available for heating of our homes. If we do not encourage better insulation for old homes, then just the simple substitution of green electric heating will not keep us warm enough on very cold winter days, as it's unable to give the quick burst of heating we would need. Using hydrogen as a gas substitute is so far away in time as it needs a massive investment in carbon-free electricity, which is not yet being championed by successive governments. So it's vital that this council adopt policies that all new housing built to last for the next 100 years is built to the best possible passive standards with a minimal need to heat the homes. Indeed, they should go one better and be carbon positive, being able to generate power for the grid. The video of the park area in development is an eye-opener to what can be achieved on what looks like a conventional housing estate, yet it embraces technology to make it a place to want to live. So I recommend this motion to you all. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We have 4 speakers. Councillor Rafel.
Well, Madam Mayor, I'm happy to support this motion. It perhaps falls into my portfolio, and I don't know whether I'm going to be in the same job after the election, but if I am re-elected and get the same job, then I'll be happy to pursue this further. Of course, we don't know what the outcome of this research will be. We don't know whether there are sites that are going to be possible to achieve this, but that's not really, I mean, that is obviously an aim of this motion, but the other aim is to really wrestle with the topics. And I hope that members will have regard to the work that's been done in the climate change map, which only met within the last few days, where we are looking at setting standards for new developments as part of the local plan update. And some of what will be revealed by this work will no doubt directly overlap with that work as it is progressed. So, and it is exciting. But we have to always keep our feet on the ground about what can be achieved and the timing of things, because schemes that perhaps have already got planning permission are much harder to influence than those that have yet got planning permission. And we should just remember that when we consider what schemes might be available for this, this type of work. But it is exciting. I printed out, I have it here, I don't know if you can see, but I'm waving something that says Nailsea the Uplands on here, and I've done my homework and I enjoyed what I saw. So let's see where it goes in due course, but I'm sure the next cabinet will look to wrestle with this eagerly.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tristan Robinson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'd like to start by welcoming this motion. In order to tackle carbon emissions and meet our aspirations of net zero by 2030, we absolutely need to address future housing growth, but also the existing stock in the borough. Homes are currently responsible for around a quarter of carbon emissions in the borough, so we absolutely need to do all we can through the local plan update and with partners to address this. We already work with BASP and the Low Carbon Energy Forum to tackle climate change and promote sustainable initiatives across the borough, such as Solar Together Hampshire, which was featured in Basingstoke and Deane today last month, but of course we must do much, much more. To take just one issue mentioned in the motion, rainwater harvesting, did you know that 35% of the water used in homes is for flushing the loo? Another 5 to 7% for the washing machine, and another 5 to 7% for washing cars. That's at least 50% of the water we use in the home that doesn't need to be clean filtered water. Sometimes I think we forget that it falls out of the sky. We must explore rainwater harvesting in full to tackle water shortages and reduce fuel poverty. I very much look forward to picking this up with members of the Climate Emergency MAP, the CEP committee, and also with Councillor Reachus and Councillor Rafael. To realise our ambitions for a zero carbon future, it's incumbent on all of us to hold the feet of the private sector to the fire and drive meaningful change for our residents through the local plan review. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor McCormick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What Councillor Trista Robinson has just said has made me feel a lot easier about washing my car. I don't wash it anywhere near often enough. Being an owner of a white car, my advice to anyone is don't own a white car. It's never clean enough. It gets dirty at the drop of a hat. I mean, there's much to commend in this motion, and there's much I think that we could do. Each and every house in this borough has to be carbon neutral if we're to achieve carbon neutrality. And it's only going to be accounting for 25% of our emissions. That's the scale of the problem. When we've got something like 65,000 houses across the borough, it's a huge task. The relatively easy part of it is making sure that we start with our new homes. And for things like solar panels, three-phase electricity, home batteries, all that, that's relatively easy to do. For those of us who have existing housing stock, it's going to be a lot harder. But maybe what we can get from this is some accumulation of wisdom that makes it easier for the rest of us to follow through on this. As for the deep borehole geothermal, I'm not sure what our prospects are for geothermal energy in Basingstoke. Maybe there's some subterranean chamber of hot air that councillors go to when they retire from this borough that might help us out there. But, you know, we need to think very carefully about local electricity generation, making sure we don't get stuff off the grid, consider these things in the round. And I have very high expectations for Manydown. I mean, this example development in the Rhondda, and I've seen the video, it's 250 houses. Manydown's 12 times that size. Just think what we could achieve if we have a positive vision for Manydown. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Isaac.
Oh, good evening, Madam Mayor. And thank you, councillors, for the motion. It's one I support. And yes, Councillor McCormack, we've got some very big positive ambitions in relation to Manydown. It's important that we learn from this project and others, because there's a lot of exciting advances being made in housing design, and including construction, and we also need to take account here of the viability and financing of such schemes, and also the benefit to occupants in reduced heating costs and better living conditions, and of course looking after our planet. So in relation to Manydown, these are the sort of things that can contribute to the evolution of the Manydown standard, with which we're working with our partners, Urban and Civic and Wellcome Trust and Hampshire County Council. And I will be talking to Urban and Civic, encouraging them to look at Park Erin and other schemes like it, so that we are going to get the best in terms of the environmental qualities and standards at Manydown.
Thank you. Oh, I've got one more hand. This is the last speaker, Councillor Putty.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have got a big development in our area here on the golf course. And I recently went to a meeting, and I did mention, because we got a very good example. Sainsbury has got thermal water that does its heating. They have managed to do that. So why couldn't going 1,000 houses being built on the golf course, couldn't find out whether we can bring up the thermal water and heat up those buildings. But anyway, I am disappointed that this is not going to be done. And there is a very good area, although it is choke area, but if Sainsbury can do it, I'm sure the other developers can do it. And I really feel that some of these developers don't want to get into it because it's too expensive for them. And I welcome this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jones?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I'll be quick. I fully support this. I think it needs to wait councillors got banging on the years about regeneration. We mustn't forget people in the old houses, especially the ones we can't change worse than the new one now. We should do that along.
Councillor Jones, Councillor Jones, I'm really sorry to interrupt you, but there's something slightly amiss with your audio and we can't understand what you're saying. I'm so sorry about that. But
I thought it was a Dalek.
You sound as if you're in a diving bell under the water. So I'm sorry about that, but can I move on now to Councillor Gardner for the last talk, please?
Very briefly, can we make sure that these standards are also introduced on the leisure park when it's developed?
Thank you very much. Right, Councillor Mackay, do you want to briefly sum up?
Yeah, yes, very briefly, given the time, especially by the cosmic clock that Councillor Konieczko referred to earlier. Just a couple of key points then. We really need action now. It's approaching 2 years since we declared the climate emergency. The BAST meeting was absolutely right. An exemplar project, a lighthouse project, really is key to motivating all of our partners and the community that we desperately need on side with us through what's going to be a very difficult process. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So in the debate, we've only heard from supporters, but I don't want to be presumptuous. So again, please, can you raise your virtual hand if there's dissent? And if you're not in support of the motion, and I'll just wait a few seconds just to see. No, I think we're all in agreement on that. So that motion is carried. Thank you very much. Thank you for that debate. Moving on to item 11, which is the adoption of the climate change and air quality strategy. I know there was some talk about an amendment. So could I ask Councillor Eachus to let us know, please, and to introduce?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I was going to introduce the paper and then just mention the amendment at the end. I'm hoping it will be agreed and it will become clear why we've made that amendment and the purpose of it in my introduction.
Yes, if you could introduce the recommendation, and we'll second that, and then tell us what the amendment is. We'll second that, and I will test the water on the amendment, and if that's generally agreed, then we can do the substantive talk. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So tackling the climate emergency is something that all council members agree is a priority, hence the cross-party support in making the declaration in 2019. To that end, I'm pleased to be bringing to you today the paper seeking adoption of the climate change and air quality strategy. This represents both the culmination of significant work to date as well as just the start of further work and action. I really want to make the point of it being the start and want to reassure everyone this is not just a strategy that once adopted will be forgotten about and simply discussed once a year. This is a living document, a really important document, and it is just the start. With the support of the MAP and the established Officers Delivery Group, I'm confident that we can now continue with the important task of implementing the strategy and making sure that we meet the targets set out in the Climate Emergency Declaration. I want to thank all those who have contributed to date, which includes other councillors through the Members Advisory Panel, officers from across the council, external consultants, and importantly, residents and interested parties. We had a great response to our public consultation, and it is clear this is a really important issue for our residents. We must all recognise that the targets in the declaration are demanding and ambitious, and I think we dealt with that with Martin Heath's question earlier. particularly when we look at those of the government and other partners with an aim to be carbon neutral as an organisation by late 2025 and as a wider borough by 2030. But we will do all we can, and we are committed to meeting these targets. We've already taken a number of important steps to reduce our emissions, including things like moving our electricity supply to green sources, rolling out EV charging points, introducing electric vehicles for our parking team, more broadly streamlining climate change into our decision-making, service planning, and in our training and development programme. We are also ensuring that climate change is built into other strategy documents. I do also recognise that behaviour change is going to be a huge part of this, and that's behaviour change of everybody, every resident. And so we are looking at doing a big piece of work. Again, as Councillor Fowle said earlier, we don't know who will be here after May, but if I am, then the plan is to make sure we're working along with officers to really work with how we get residents to change their behaviour. And I don't think that's just a one-off comms piece, that's an ongoing project, and we will absolutely need to properly resource that, because that will be ongoing throughout the whole of the 10 years really. The new strategy sets the framework for more actions to be developed and implemented if we are to achieve our targets, and we recognise this requires ongoing resource and commitment in the future. Officers are currently reviewing the resourcing to make sure all of this work can be done. To that end, we are proposing to add a further 1 million to the Climate Change Reserve this year, subject to the approval of this chamber later on this agenda, which will make a total of £2 million. So based on all of that, I do recommend that full council adopt the strategy. The only amendment is, it came out of some conversations and emails with Councillor Gavin James, and it was just getting that reassurance to residents and to members that this is a moving document. It is one that we want to review, and we want to reassure all of you that this is work going on. So we have the map, we have the officers delivery group, and you'll see in the paper that we've agreed to bring a paper to CEP every year. Now, in my discussions with Councillor James, I think there was a concern that a year wasn't enough, but obviously we want officers to work on the actual climate change work. So what we've agreed, and what I've agreed with Councillor James, and I'm hoping the rest of the chamber can agree, is that it's the actual paper to adopt the climate change and air quality strategy and the 20 to 21 action plan. And the amendment is that the portfolio holder is to attend CEP committee once a year to provide a verbal update to the committee in relation to progress made against the action plan, to include confirmation the map is still meeting and what has been discussed, agreed actions being undertaken by the officer delivery group, and any other relevant information about ongoing projects and work in progress. That then means that, as per the report, 6 months later, a full written report will be taken to CEP, as discussed in the paper, to update on progress. So we would be attending CEP twice a year as opposed just to once a year, but that second time would just be the verbal update without a detailed paper. So if I was still the portfolio holder, I wouldn't be there with all the officers, but I would be able to update members on where we are with things. And I just think it's really important for members to understand that map is ongoing, because I know usually we have a map, it sits for a few sessions and then it does its job and we don't really meet again. But the whole point of this climate emergency map is that there is so much and it is going to be ongoing, and we are meeting every 6 weeks or so, and I do intend to continue to do that. So that's the main agenda item, and then with that slight amendment. And then Councillor Mahaffey was going to second both, if everybody was in agreement.
Thank you very much. So that we do this in the correct order, could I ask Councillor Mahaffey if you would just second the recommendation on the agenda first and defer your speech, and then we'll deal with the amendment. Are you happy to do that?
I am indeed. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will second it and defer if I may.
Thank you very much. So let's just deal with the amendment. We've had it proposed by Councillor Eaches. Would somebody be seconding this? Is it Councillor Gavin James, maybe?
Well, I think Councillor Mahaffey was going to just to make it easier, but Councillor James can if he wants.
Well, Madam Mayor, if I say a few words, just to say thank you to the Cabinet member for making that minor tweak. I think the public is clearly a topic that matters much to them, and I think there's always a fear that if it disappears into a strategy on a bookcase and maps in private meetings, the public will start thinking that we're going to kind of forget about it for 8 years. And I know that's not the intention of the office as already member of this council to do that. So actually bringing it out into the public and sharing our success with the public is absolutely critical, and also probably puts us under that little bit of pressure that we have to achieve success. So we've got something to share every 6 months rather than every year. So certainly it's more supportable now. Obviously, any strategy like this has never got enough in it. Things will change over the next 9 years. And again, I'm reassured that this isn't a 2021 to 2030 strategy that's going to stay the same. It will change and evolve. And I think it's important it does that. And once every 6 months, members will have an opportunity to feed into those changes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I can take it, can I, that Councillor Mahaffey has seconded the amendment. Can we deal with that amendment first? I'm not sure if anybody wants to speak to it, but can I do the usual? It seems, I sense it's going to be broadly supported. Can you raise your virtual hands if you have any problem with the amendment, please? No, okay, so the recommendation now incorporates that amendment. Councillor Eachus has spoken. Councillor Mahaffey, would you like to speak now, or would you like to speak a bit later? There's one more speaker.
If I could speak now, Madam Mayor, I'd be very grateful.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'd just like to start by saying I was delighted that my maiden speech to this council was actually in support of the climate emergency proposal when it was first voted upon. I was doubly pleased to see that the council was united in voting for it unanimously. This strategy document is the direct result of that vote, and I'd like to congratulate the cabinet member and officers for the huge amount of work that has gone on since in developing both the vision and a set of deliverable actions. We all know that climate change is important to all of us. It's important to our residents, and most of all, it's important to our children. And as such, I was very pleased to see the level of consultation that has contributed to the development of this document. The work that's already been put in hasn't just resulted in the production of a standalone document that, as Councillor James has pointed out, has the potential for sitting on a shelf for a very long time. The engagements and discussions that have taken place have had a significant knock-on effect in driving the agenda forward at a local level. I've seen this at firsthand in my ward through the establishment of a residents' climate action groups in 2 of the parishes in my ward that have been galvanised by the declaration of the emergency. The Sustainable Silchester and the Pamber Greening initiatives are direct results of the borough having nailed its colours to the mast by declaring the emergency. This is largely because residents now understand that they are not acting in isolation and that the borough stands squarely behind them in supporting local initiatives. The big ticket items led by government will not solve the climate issue on their own, and it's precisely through us leading by example and supporting grassroots organisations and actions by individual residents that we will collectively achieve our goals. The strategy, as has been pointed out, won't be perfect. These things never are. But the key issue is that the document provides a clear framework for actions going forward, and significantly, it establishes a mechanism for KPIs and ongoing monitoring and improvement. What's important now is that we support this strategy and push forward as fast as we can with the deliverables outlined in the emergency action plan. I'd like to congratulate everybody that was involved with the production of this document, and I urge us all to support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I welcome the strategy? Can I welcome the work that's been undertaken by the cabinet member and the cabinet? Can I welcome the officers' work in regard to bringing it all together, and all those members that have been involved in the map to actually get us to this stage? And it is a stage. This is a start, as has already been said. So the issue really becomes one of targets and KPIs to hold our own feet to the fire. It becomes that driving the agenda in every way we can. And I see the motions on the agenda this evening are a key part of that. All the things that we do in terms of all the various reports that come to committees, that come to this council over the next year and years ahead, will all have a key part in them, which will be how we address climate change. It is fundamental to everything that we will be doing in so many ways. So it isn't just the strategy alone that sits on the shelf that we all try to follow. It's how we then embed that through everything that we try to do in the authority and with our partners, and encourage our residents and other local authorities like our parish councils to also go on board with as well. It's also what we do as members, because I think we've got to be a critical friend. This is not to be someone that picks apart anything, but to be somebody that says, I think we can do better. I think we can do this or we can do that. It's to be that critical friend that says, yes, we want to be ambitious, and it's how far we can push things to get there quicker if we can. I think the issue becomes one of how we spend the 2 million. That 2 million is incredibly important, and how it is spent, how effectively it is spent, is a key part of this whole agenda. I get that. But then again, the entire budget is, isn't it? Because every part of that budget needs some relationship to this agenda. How we spend our money as an authority in that best endeavour to tackle climate change as quickly as we can over the next period. So all of this kind of wraps up into something that's like a golden thread, really, that needs to run through the council, that runs through everything that we're about. And as long as we can have that in our minds, I hope that we can be successful and that we can deliver on not just the strategy, but deliver on it being the most ambitious strategy we can make it going forward. So I'll be supporting it this evening and wanting to push it along as much as I possibly can over the next few years. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Last speaker, Councillor McCormick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to support this strategy. Much of what I wanted to say has been said already. I'm pleased to hear it is a living document. It definitely needs some defined objectives, some performance metrics, some real hard figures, some targets to aim for. If you look on page 3 of 10 of this, there have been 23 meetings between the 18th of July 2019 and September 2020. So we need to move on to the next level now and have tangible progress in carbon reduction schemes, things that we can point to and say, yes, we've done that, or we're doing that. And that needs to happen quite quickly. The climate emergency map. This could be a members advisory panel that breaks all records, because even when we get to 2030, there are still going to be climate issues that we will have to address as this council. We may even have to get to the point where we're looking at being a net carbon sink to try and arrest the global temperature rises, because other parts of the world may not be as successful as we are in driving down our emissions. So in accepting this, I also accept that we have a long journey ahead of us. We could have a climate emergency map that sits for the next 50 years at this rate. But if that's what it takes for us to do our part to try and save this planet, then so be it.
Thank you very much. That's the end of the debate. Do you want the last few words, Councillor Eaches?
Sorry, just trying to unmute. No, I think I said everything, but really just to thank all the members for their support. And, you know, I do really want to work with everybody moving forward to drive this forward and really do what we can and hit our targets and things.
Thank you very much. So we're looking to recommend adoption of the climate change and air quality strategy and incorporate the extra checks and balances that we heard about in the amendment. There seems to be broad support, but once again, I will ask if you could raise your hand if there is any dissent at all, and that is fine. No, okay, so that recommendation is carried. Thank you very much, everyone. Moving on to item number 12 on the agenda. This is the pay policy statement for 2021-22. Which can be found on pages 73 to 98 of the agenda book. This is a recommendation from the Human Resources Committee of the 1st of March. Can I move this from the chair?
I have no objections, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. The Deputy Mayor second it for me.
So I second it.
Thank you very much.
I second it.
Feel free to just raise your hand if you have any problem with that. Okay, that is carried. Thank you very much. Item number 13, Q3 Revenue Monitoring Report and COVID-19 Financial Impact Update for 2020 and 21 on pages 99 to 134 of the book. Councillor Rattigan, I think you will introduce and propose this, is that right?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm deputising for my colleague, Councillor Golding. I'd just like to firstly thank all of us who have worked to try and make sure that financially we as a borough have managed to navigate the COVID pandemic financially and to give some certainties, not just to ourselves and our staff, but also to our residents to ensure that services are well paid for and the ability to fund things in the future are well recommended. It is, once again, my pleasure to thank the finance team, whose efforts on our behalf and that of our residents has been exemplary, and that their ability to navigate difficult, challenging and changing circumstances in our finances needs to be properly recognised. I don't want to dwell too much on this, but of course, I think it is important that we understand that the outturn was better than we had hoped for earlier on in the financial year. And therefore, we have been able to allocate an extra £1 million directly to our climate change reserve. I hope that we will use that money wisely. Projects that can come forward will come forward to us. And regardless of whoever is the administration, that we will use that money wisely to meet our climate change goals and to foster a better and greener provision for our residents. But as I said to Sheila Peacock earlier in the agenda, it is important that we also focus on that economic recovery. And we've been able to allocate £1 million towards that economic recovery framework to boost what we do, to ensure that our businesses, whether large or small, have the best and most fertile grounds to grow, to adapt, change if they have to, but to be around for our future and the future of their workforce. It is important, in my view, that we do everything we can to foster economic growth. And I believe that the allocation of money in this budget to help with that will be well used. As I have said to many of you, it is important that we use our money wisely, and therefore I make the offer. I may not be the administration, but I will help anybody who is the administration to make sure this money is used wisely for the benefit of all and the economic recovery that we all hope will come out over the next few months and obviously longer term in the years to come. I commend it and recommend it to you, but I'm happy to take any questions on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall we just get it seconded first? Is that Councillor Isaacs?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'm happy to second the report.
Thank you very much. I have a request from Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It just speaking to the particular point that the leader raised in terms of the economic recovery fund reserve, which I welcome. I think the debate that was had at committee on this was incredibly important, and it is worth just saying a couple of points about the issues that were raised. I think the agreement and I think the focus around inward investment and green economic growth is absolutely crucial to driving Basingstoke and Dean's economy forward. And by that, it's not just about creating jobs, it's also about supporting our SMEs and supporting the entrepreneurs that want to start up businesses. It's about that broad-based growth that we want to see across all sectors. We recognise that the manufacturing industry in Basingstoke is something that we are very proud of as a borough and deserves a tremendous amount of support to generate the kind of investment in new businesses that we want to see, and also help those that are still here grow and recover over the period. One of the issues I think that was raised that I would highlight, and I think is a concern that we would all share, is the youth unemployment rate as a consequence of COVID and the economic impact that we've seen. And that is something that we need as a borough to work towards addressing. And I think to all our young people, and it's across our societies, across our communities, but I think in terms of giving young people the hope that we will help the economy recover and they will have jobs, they will have a future in that economy, is an incredibly important message that we need to get out and work we need to do to make sure that nobody is left behind in terms of the economic recovery in our borough. So I welcome the fund and I welcome the projects I hope that will fall out of it that will make a difference to people's lives across our borough.
Thank you very much. So the recommendations are listed on page 101 of the agenda book. 8 points to note and points 9 to 12 to be approved. Oh, Councillor Rattigan, you wish to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just sort of pick up on those points from Councillor Harvey and the very full discussions that we did have at committee. I reiterate a number of points that were raised at committee. Firstly, the pledge to our youngest in our communities. The 18 to 25-year-olds have suffered more than most within the pandemic, but we promise to reskill, upskill those in our community. And for those who accessing jobs is particularly difficult, those who English is a second language, and for those who have disabilities. I was very impressed at how the committee, all of us, realised how many people could be left behind, and my pledge is to make sure that they are not. So thank you for that reminder.
Thank you very much. So once again, for this one, I'm looking for hands to be raised if there's any dissent. If you would do so now, please. Thank you very much. So that is approved and carried. I think we'll just deal with the next item and then take a short break. So we'll just finish off item 14 on the agenda, which is the members' allowances for 2021-22 on pages 135 to 146. Just by way of explanation briefly, this is the final year of our scheme of allowances agreed in 2017 and first applied in 2018. Although it allows for application of the pay index agreed for officers, that index has yet to be announced, and it is in any case most likely to be zero this year anyway. However, we do have to approve the allowances for this year in any case and delegate any index adjustments, should there be any, which there probably won't, and necessary actions to be made by the Head of Law and Governance in consultation with the Executive Director of Corporate Services. So can I move this from the chair? Oh, I've got two speakers. Okay, Councillor Fillimore first.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'd like to start by quoting your chaplain, what he said earlier, to consider others better than yourself. These are extraordinary times, and for that reason, I oppose awarding of a 2% increase in members' allowances to ourselves and or our successors. I believe it's morally wrong and socially unjust at a time when many of our residents are struggling with the effects of a global pandemic, economically and medically. Our residents that are furloughed who experience a 20% reduction in their pay. Our brilliant nurses are only being offered a divisory 1% increase in their pay, and pay increases in the public sector are frozen. And council taxpayers have had to stomach an increase. I get the point previously raised by the Liberal leader that adequate remuneration can be a barrier to becoming a councillor, resulting in only in those that can afford to stand coming forward. I also understand that an individual member can forego some or all of their allowance. However, wouldn't it be a clear statement of support and an example to our residents if this were done collectively? I therefore would be voting against this recommendation and would ask that a recorded vote be taken.
Thank you very much. Councillor McCormick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to seek clarification that the choice before us is basically to have a 0% pay rise in line with what our staff are taking. I think it's probably the view of everyone in this chamber that it would be extremely unfair for councillors to have a pay rise when our staff don't. I think most of us would accept that we would have to have a pay freeze. If this doesn't get approved and councillors lose their allowances, though, there are some that rely on it who will find it very difficult to cope. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just get our Head of Legal Services, Fiona Thompson, just to answer your question, Councillor McCormick.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. The index mirrors whatever the staff might get, and as has already been indicated, it's been announced by the government that there'll be a pay freeze this year, so it's unlikely that there will be any increase.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tristan Robinson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to the monitoring officer for that clarification. I would like that clarification to be made again, because it will certainly affect the way that I vote on this matter, and I would also appreciate some further clarification on the item. As I understand it, the vote tonight is whether to approve a scheme of members' allowances or not. It is not just related to the increase. So if members vote against this paper, there will be no allowances at all. I completely understand and appreciate the point that has been made by Councillor Phillimore and Councillor McCormick. And if what I say is correct, I would welcome an amendment to move that to 0% increase. Or alternatively, if the monitoring officer could clarify 100% that members' allowances will be pegged to be exactly the same as the increase for staff, then I would be content for it to vote as is on the paper. Hopefully that made sense.
Back to Fiona Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, the recommendation is in three parts. The first part is to adopt the scheme of allowances. So Councillor Robinson is correct that if you don't agree that recommendation, then there will be no allowances. The second part is very specific, and it is within the scheme that any index is linked to whatever the officers may get this year. And as I've already indicated, we're not sure, but it looks unlikely because of what the government have said that will be the case. So I can 100% guarantee it's linked to whatever the officers might get.
That's incredibly helpful, thank you. So if we vote for this tonight, if because of the government pay freeze, the officers do not get an increase, then neither do we.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely, in my view, that's absolutely right and proper, because councillors should not expect a higher allowance than those of the officers who do an incredibly valuable job for the residents of Basingstoke and Dean.
Councillor McCormick, you've already spoken and you've asked to speak again.
No, sorry, Madam Mayor, I was a bit late lowering my hand.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I apologise if I'm just about to overcomplicate matters, but those three different recommendations could be taken as three separate votes, so that members could adopt the scheme as is, and then they could exercise their judgment as to the application of the index, yes or no, and then obviously conduct the delegation to officers to conduct the other parts of what needs to be done in the future. So it could be taken in thirds that would allow us at least to express a view on each bit of it without throwing the whole scheme out, and therein take forward what both Councillor Robinson and Councillor McCormick and Councillor Phillimore are saying, I think. It would give perhaps a little bit more assurance on the basis of those members that don't want to see an increase at all on the basis of the views expressed.
Thank you. Just bear with me while we take some further advice. Okay, it's confirmed that yes, we could do it in separate votes if that's what you really want. Can I just ask what Councillor Tristan Robinson wanted to say first, please?
Two things very briefly, Madam Mayor, and that was first, I think if you do want to take it separately, that might be helpful in the interest of moving things along. My only other point, and members who've had this debate in council meetings before will appreciate, I have a fundamental view on the fact that I do not believe that we as councillors should set our own pay. I think that is fundamentally wrong, and I think for those reasons we have had a scheme for many years which says that we link our allowances to those of the officers, and I think that is the right and the proper thing to do, because if the officers receive a modest increase of say 2%, the councillors receive that too. If the officers receive zero, we receive zero. And I think that principle of us not setting our own pay and us being in line with the officers is incredibly important. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gavin James.
Thank you, Mayor. I was going to make exactly the same point, probably slightly better than he did, but he's made it anyway. The other thing I would mention is if we're going to break this down into 3 votes, we are facing a situation where we are going to have a contest. Do we A, vote for a 0% increase, or B, vote for a freeze? And to be honest, I think life's too short for that. Can we just take the whole lot on block? Thank you.
Right. We've discussed it. It's very, very unlikely that in any case we will get any increase at all, but whatever happens, it's linked to officers. I think we will therefore just go for the whole thing and vote. And we will go obviously for a proper recorded vote as requested by Councillor Phillimore. So over to Fiona, please.
Thank you. If you can vote for, against or abstain in relation to the recommendations. Councillor Ashfield.
For.
Councillor Bean.
For.
Councillor Michael Bound.
For.
Councillor Simon Bound.
For.
Councillor Carruthers.
For.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Cousins. For. Councillor Cubitt.
For.
Councillor Eachus.
For.
Councillor Edwards.
For.
Councillor Faulkner.
For.
Councillor Jane Frankham.
For.
Councillor Paul Frankham.
For.
Councillor Freeman.
For.
Councillor Frost.
For.
Councillor Gardner.
We're having a break after this, aren't we? Mike's still on, Mum.
Sorry. Councillor Gardner, can I ask you to repeat?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Gaskell.
For.
Councillor George.
For.
Councillor Harvey.
For.
Councillor Hickling.
For.
Councillor Hussey.
For.
Councillor Isaac.
For.
Councillor Gavin James. For. Councillor Laura James.
For.
Councillor Konietzko.
For.
Councillor Kinnear.
For.
Councillor Jones.
Never know.
Sorry. Is that... I can't see him. Has he put his thumb up or something?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Leeks.
For.
Councillor Lovegrove.
For.
Councillor McCormick.
For.
Councillor Mackay.
For.
Councillor Mahaffey.
For.
Councillor Miller.
For.
Councillor Phillimore.
Against.
Councillor Potter.
For.
Councillor Putty.
For.
Councillor Regan.
For.
Councillor Reid.
Abstain.
Councillor Rattigan.
For.
Councillor Nick Robinson.
For.
Councillor Tristan Robinson.
For.
Councillor Raphael.
For.
Councillor Sanders.
Abstain on the grounds I shan't be here, so I really shouldn't be influencing it.
Councillor Still,
4.
Councillor Diane Taylor,
4.
Councillor Kim Taylor,
4.
Councillor Mark Taylor,
Abstain.
Councillor Tilbury,
Against.
Councillor Tomlin,
4.
Councillor Vaux,
4.
Councillor Watts,
4.
Councillor Janet Westbrook,
4.
Councillor Michael Westbrook,
4.
Councillor Wooldridge.
4.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The votes were 4, 49, against 2, and 3 abstentions.
Thank you very much. So that is carried. And we will now take a short break and reconvene at 8:50. 8:50. See you soon.
See, I'm on mute now. Really.
Tony, the sound is really horrible and crackly.
No, that's just Tony anyway.
If you keep on, I might start singing to you, and then you won't like it.
You're back properly now.
Is that back? That is.
Yeah, that's back properly. What did you just do?
I actually, I'm on the video I unmuted it from there, but I've done that last time. It didn't, or I can unmute. But it's coming up unmuted. But I'll have to. But that's from the top. I'll try that if I.
Yeah, just keep that going in future. Right, I'm going to go and make a cup of tea now, I think.
Yeah, I'm going to go and get my abacus out and see if that works better. Right, see ya.
Good on you, Tony. You've done well.
Councillors, if you can hear me, we're just waiting for Democratic Services to take the screen down. Oh, there we go. Okay. Thank you. Hope you've all got your coffee at the ready. I'll just wait for the cameras to come on. So waiting for Councillor Tilbury and Councillor Leeks to turn their, and Mark Taylor, Councillor Mark Taylor, to turn their cameras on. So everyone. Are we there now?
Councillor Michael Bound.
Councillor Michael Bound, your camera, please. Good, thank you. We're all here again. Welcome back. Right, we're going to move on now to the new motions which have come in for this meeting. And the first one, item 15 on the agenda, is a motion about the protection and enhancement of the North Hampshire Downs. Councillor Affel, would you propose this and explain it, please?
Madam Mayor, I formally propose this motion and the amended wording is in the update papers. Important members see it. Madam Mayor, we all love our borough and we all recognise the importance of its landscape and the natural environment. The recent lockdown has demonstrated how the open countryside around Basingstoke and around our larger villages has been a green lung for our residents. The open space and beautiful landscapes have directly contributed to everyone's well-being, and we need to ensure that they remain protected for our children and our grandchildren to enjoy. But this amended motion is not all about us. At long last, we all recognise the harm caused by previous decisions to our natural environment. By way of example, many of you will recall the disruption to the habitat of a large colony of toads by the new development at Cufford Lane. We are fortunate to have residents who regularly address us on the natural environment. They always tell us that we are trying to retrofit green policies after a development decision has been taken. They think that we make token efforts by setting aside a piece of green space that will make up for the harm caused by a much wider development. They say that we lack a strategic approach and we fail to grasp the harm being caused. Well, we do take their arguments seriously, and we will have to define and impose biodiversity net gain on new applications and create nature recovery areas in our borough. But where are those areas going to be? Which areas are we going to value as sacrosanct and protected from significant development? Which areas will we be championing for the natural environment outside of the North Wessex Downs? Unfortunately, away from the North Wessex Downs, our precious landscapes and environments are vulnerable to developers. 3 factors cause us to need to do something now. First, our towns and larger villages are so much bigger than they were when the issue of designation was last considered in 1972, nearly 50 years ago, and the demand for new housing is so much greater. Second, most major landowners previously wanted to farm to keep their roles as stewards of the countryside for their families and for future generations. Now many are easily tempted to sell. And thirdly, national planning policy has determined that our local plan and our wonderful neighbourhood plans can be devalued when we don't have a 5-year land supply. And parts of our borough are feeling this most acutely. Above all, our residents expect us to do something now, to try all legal means to protect all valued landscapes and as much of the natural environment as possible from significant development. They don't expect us to wring our hands and give up. They don't expect us to blame each other for this situation. They know we need new homes in our borough. That is why so many of our villages embrace neighbourhood planning, and that is why they feel so let down by the current situation. They don't expect us to just look after our own area, which we represent. We share this borough with the natural environment, which does not recognise ward boundaries. So we should not judge this on ward boundaries. Without a 5-year land supply, currently there is no strong protection for that great swathe of land from Sherburn St John to Pamber, and then moving northeast through Little London to Silchester, close to Bramley and across to Stratfield Say. Without a 5-year land supply, there's no strong protection for the Loddon Valley, from Stratfield Turgis across to Eversley in Hart, and from Newnham in the south to Hartley Witney in Hart. And of course, without a 5-year land supply, there's no strong protection for the North Hampshire Downs area to the south of the M3. Looking at the possibility of designation for parts or all of these areas could give greater protection in the current situation. It could give greater protection to the east of Sherfield with the difficulties the residents are facing with Wildmoor and potential development there. It is time we had significant protection that creates a green corridor that goes east-west to the north of Basingstoke, east-west to the south of Basingstoke, and goes north-south to the east of Basingstoke into Hart. This motion is all about starting an urgent conversation at EPH about all the valued landscapes across our borough, protecting villages north, south and east in our borough for future generations, and how we go about protecting the natural environment within those areas. This motion is all about us having an urgent conversation at EPH about some form of designation for these areas. Please support this motion and allow us, if we get re-elected, to get that conversation started.
Thank you very much, Councillor O'Fell. Councillor McCormick, do you want to second this and then either speak or defer?
I think I'll speak now, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to second this motion. It's a rare piece of cross-border working across the M3, but we have a common interest in this. As Councillor O'Fell rightly mentions, the lockdown has seen a lot of people going outdoors a lot more to take exercise, one of the few reasons they can leave the house in lockdown conditions. And I've had representations from a large number of my residents in my ward and the adjoining wards in Grove and Hatch Warren that cross the M3 and use the lovely country walks and cycling, running in the countryside around the back of Clidston, and the scenery is spectacular. Even what you can see from the motorway is quite spectacular. And most of my residents who've expressed an interest in this have, expressed dismay, some horrified at the thought that some of this might be built on and the amenity change. Much of the modern town was already in place by 1972, and a lot of the itinerant workers that used to work the land were being housed in the borough. We do have a massive degree of pressure for building new houses. We have lost our 5-year supply. We need to get it back. But recent examples of applications either approved or pending to the southwest of Basingstoke illustrates the danger and the sense of urgency. We have a scheme that is currently a placeholder in the local plan south of the M3, and residents rightly fear that if that gets into the local plan, the dam will eventually burst. And what we've seen by the M3 Junction 7, not least with the proposals for warehousing and lots of other things, and recent conversations about, well, maybe we're building a bit too much and the warehousing might jeopardise the plans we have for the hospital. And we've got 9,000 houses in Manydown and more besides. Potentially, when you look at some of the other options that you might have with Mitchell-Dever, we could quite easily see near contiguous urban development between Basingstoke and Winchester, which many of us would have thought would not be possible. Certainly, if you develop as far as the Crem, you're pretty much halfway to Winchester. You're about 8 miles outside the town, at least a mile out from North Waltham. So we would be doing our residents a disservice if we didn't at least explore opportunities to make sure that some of our most valued pieces of countryside are protected. And there's a lot going for the North Hampshire Downs, from Dummer going through past the back of Clidston, Hackwood Park, all around there. In my view, some of that has a lot of our residents have yet to discover it. I mean, I go around that way a lot when I go cross-country running, and you can see from some of the paths there at Hampshire that you'll never see from the car. And it has been, by and large, unchanged for the last couple of 100 years. And it could change quite quickly if we're not careful. Therefore, I have no hesitation in seconding this motion.
Thank you very much. We have a few speakers. Councillor Tristan Robinson first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. While I hold the proposer of this motion in incredibly high regard as someone whom I respect deeply, I am afraid that I will not be able to support this motion for the Hampshire Downs this evening. Our borough of Basingstoke-on-Deane is some 245 square miles, of which around 80 is already AONB already. Add in another 3 for the nuclear zone in Tadley, 8 for the Thames Basin Heath SPA, 11 for the Basingstoke conurbation, plus 5 for rural conurbations, 5 for Manydown Phase 1 and 2, totaling 112 square miles, 46% of our borough. Adding in an additional restriction for the vast majority of the area south of the M3 would add another 41 square miles of restriction, an increase of 37%. Increasing the level of restriction in spatial planning terms across Basingstoke-on-Deane by 37% would be an unacceptably high burden for the remaining parts of the borough. It would prevent development across the whole of the new area to exceptional circumstances only, leaving settlements like Sherfield-on-Loddon, Bramley, Sherburn St John and Basing, together with the south of Whitchurch and Overton and north of Kingsclear, to take the full share of any government-imposed housing target, currently 850 homes a year. This is without including any other restrictions such as water quality and nitrates, registered parks and gardens, triple SIs, flooding zones or mineral safeguarding zones. The North Hampshire Downs is of course an area of exceptional natural beauty, as are the rolling landscapes of Piccadilly Hill in Ramsdale and Monk Sherborne, the sweeping pasture of the wider Stratfield Say estate at Sherfield and Bramley, and the meadows of the Vine estate in Sherburn St John. I completely respect those who wish to protect their area of our borough, but I would implore this council to not do it at the expense of the beautiful villages many others represent. Madam Mayor, we must do it for all or none at all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Nick Robinson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to thank Councillors Raffel and McCormack for this motion, in particular for their engagement with me in amending the original submission shown in the main agenda. I welcome any initiative which seeks to protect our rural communities and natural habitats. This motion refers to the Hampshire Downs landscape as being enjoyed by walkers, cyclists and horse riders. This applies equally to many of our beautiful landscape and historic settlements, such as Rome and Silchester and Old Basling. The strategic gap between Bramley and Sherfield hosts an Iron Age multivallate hill fort. The rolling hills and chalk streams of the Test Valley at Overton and Whitchurch, I'm sure, have many notable assets which are valued and enjoyed by many of the residents from both town and village in this particularly difficult last 12 months. Basingstoke-Dean needs to build 8,450 houses over the next 10 years to meet government targets. None of us want them in our wards. So it is important that any assessment of our rural landscapes and heritage is fair by not protecting one area by putting another area at risk of unfair development. We're already at risk of having near continuous development between Basingstoke and Reading. Motion before us now has been vastly improved, and I would like to support it. But before I can, I need an absolute assurance from the proposer that equal consideration will be given to all our historic villages and rural landscapes. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Raffel and also Councillor McCormack for bringing this motion before Council. And I will be very brief. I think the motion as amended, okay, is looking at important landscapes across the whole borough rather than just looking at the North Downs, okay, and also looking at the nature recovery areas across the borough. I will be very happy to have this debate to be brought before EPH should I be elected and should I be appointed chair of EPH. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Still.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Basingstoke is a great place to live because we are a great town surrounded by the most beautiful countryside. The North Downs is part of that, but not the only part. The Loddon Valley with its springs and wildlife areas, Pamber Forest to the north, the sanctuary for butterflies and moths, Petty's Brooks. We need a better plan to protect them all. Let's not forget what has happened to some of our beautiful green spaces in recent years. Dixon Road, designed a nature buffer zone next to Sherfield Park, saw the illegal felling of more than 500 trees and a conviction in court for this outrageous criminal act, but that won't bring back that wildlife asset. So what we need is a cohesive plan, and squarely that is the opportunity the new local plan officers. I can understand why Councillor Fell puts forward his proposals today, and I'm sure he has the very best of intentions, but could he not inadvertently be putting additional house building pressures on the areas I have mentioned above? So rather than this piecemeal approach, should we not be looking at the need to protect our wonderful green spaces in the round, looking at how we can maintain the close link between the town and its surrounding countryside, which has been a lifeline for us all over the past 12 months through this pandemic? So I shall not be supporting this motion today, because we need to be more ambitious than this. I want protection for all of our valuable green spaces scattered around our town, for what Councillor Fell is proposing to be part of a whole Basingstoke plan for protecting and nurturing our green spaces, and not creating additional pressure in the areas outside of the protection area Councillor Fell has identified. That way we protect all of our community's special connections with their local areas of green space. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This motion clearly sets out to address a significant need in the borough. It's important to protect our open spaces, landscapes and other notable features that make this borough such a good place to live with such a diversity of nature and beautiful countryside. The motion has been amended to include more scope for work by officers to look to see if AONB or other designations would be appropriate in other areas. This is welcome. However, there are many other locations of ancient woodland, wildlife corridors and fauna that are enjoyed by many other communities, bringing the wellbeing benefits to residents all across the whole borough. I see no difference in the countryside quality and landscape to the south of the M3 when compared to other areas of the borough, and so I see no need to protect one area over another. To protect the area in question against development or over any other, to me, seems highly unfair on our borough residents. Protect and pass the problem to other wards might seem to be the intent. Indeed, the proposal for development at the Swallock Garden community may well be the housing that will come forward in a timely fashion to help our lack of a 5-year land supply, as the promoter seems more than ready to provide what appears to be a sensitive scheme. It was interesting to note that the AONB management's reply to our issues and options consultation raised no comments on the land to the south of the M3 or even referred to any issue with the Swallock Garden community development. They did list many other sites in depth, but showed no concern for protection of the land referred to in this motion. We do not have the clear terms of reference of this piece of work requested of officers. So the way this motion prioritises getting the AONB in place first and then having a look at whether any other sites are suitable as a secondary objective is clearly worded that there is a priority with which I cannot agree. It will be better than the motion if the motion were reconsidered, reworded and debated again after the election rather than rushed through now. So I will not be supporting this motion as it is currently worded. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. I've got one more speaker at the moment, that's Councillor Tilbury.
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I mean, I'm supportive of the motion, but I mean, blimey, anyone would think there was an election coming up, wouldn't there? I mean, we have a problem with the 5-year land supply, but that's entirely caused by Manydown. I mean, since 2012, we've been messing about with that and done nothing with it. That should be, there should be houses being built on there now. We wouldn't have a problem with the 5-year land supply. This is entirely down to this administration. On a technical point, I mean, this refers to the North Hampshire Downs. Well, if you live in Overton, the North Hampshire Downs are the downs north of Overton that stretch between us and Kingsclear, keep the barbarians like Kennet Bay. That's the North Hampshire Downs to us, and there seems to be some confusion over terminology. Although we come under the North Wessex Downs area of outstanding natural beauty, to people in our sort of neck of the woods, the North Hampshire Downs are the downs north of us, you know, in the north of Hampshire. So the area you're referring to, the sort of Farley Mount, that area, which is very nice, you know, is another area altogether. It may be called the North Hampshire Downs in some areas, but there is a bit of a confusion here. But yeah, I'm sympathetic to this, but unfortunately, I think we're now seeing the problem. You know, for a long time, well, you know, the North Hampshire Downs have kept the barbarians to the north at bay for us, but you know, likewise, the M3 has kept, you know, Basingstoke away from the parishes to the south, and unfortunately, that's now looks like it's going to be breached. And you know, you're now getting what we've had for years, and the reality is we've just got to try and reduce the levels of development, build more in the town, which means build more flats, really, which no one seems to like, or we've got to stop trying to promote the area as an area for growth. You can't have it always. And, you know, I know this is well-meaning and I'm very supportive of it. It's a lovely area around there, but, you know, as others have said, this is, you know, trying to save one area to the detriment of others. And, you know, it doesn't work. We need to stick together and work for a better borough, not try and just save our own little areas. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mahaffey.
Thank you very much. It seems to me that all of us that represent rural wards feel exactly the same about this. That we all support the tenor of the motion, but we just have problems with the exact area that we're talking about. I noted, Councillor Raffel, when Councillor Robinson asked for equal consideration to all areas of the borough. I noted that Councillor Raffel gave a very sort of vigorous thumbs up to that. So rather than bringing this back to council at a later date for reconsideration, can we not just amend the motion now to remove the words North Hampshire Downs and put in something akin to our rural areas? Is that possible? I don't know if that's possible or not.
It's only possible if Councillor Raffel and Councillor McCormick agree to it. Councillor Raffel? Councillor Raffel, would you agree to that sort of amendment or not?
Yes.
Can you read out for us what that first paragraph would say in that case?
That the council urgently asks officers in the EPH committee to examine working with residents, neighbouring designation areas, neighbouring district and county councils and Natural England and other interested bodies to seek designation of all areas of the borough in order to protect our historic villages and landscapes.
Okay, and is Councillor McCormick in agreement with that?
Only if it's not a negating amendment, which we couldn't allow anyway.
If the proposer and seconder agree on the amendment, then that is the motion that we're looking at.
Madam Mayor, of course, we had a question earlier that asked us to look in relation to the second part to all areas of the borough. I think it's given that part of the borough is in the North Wessex Downs, so clearly that's covered, and clearly the urban areas, although the questioner thought the urban areas should be looked at as well in terms of nature recovery networks as well, and so that does work if that's possible, but that's how it's framed now.
Yeah. So is Councillor McCormick in agreement with it?
Yes.
Right. Let me just ask if officers have got that down. Right. Councillor Raffel, we just need to be absolutely sure that we know what we're voting on. That something like this, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the council urgently asks officers and the EPH committee to examine working with residents, neighbouring designated areas, neighbouring district and county councils and Natural England and other interested bodies to seek designation of all areas of the borough in order to protect, can't read it. It doesn't quite make sense. I think we've got to make it make sense. Could you just rewrite that a little bit?
Yes.
Because we can't just designate the areas, they've got to be designated something, or take out the word designation.
I think the words you're looking for, Mark, are in order to seek designation, in order to protect our historic villages and landscapes. I think it's probably, but I think a number of members will have the same question that I do, which is, can we have our assurance from yourself and officer that there is now no reference to the North Hampshire Downs anywhere in the recommendation. It needs to cover the whole borough. As I said in my speech, it's all or none at all.
Right. Well, you have the commitment that in 1 and 2 there's no reference, and they are the recommendations to the North Hampshire Downs. I prefer the wording of Councillor Robinson that to seek designation in order to protect our historic villages and landscapes. That is always good to get a second pair of eyes, and thank you for that. And it is all to be considered, which Councillor Nick Robinson asked. I would have said that in my summing up. But I know the clock has been stopped at the moment, I hope, for everyone's sake. So yes, all.
Okay, thank you. So if we got that now, councillors, it's to seek designation in order to protect all of our historic villages and landscapes. We got that. Right, we've got some more speakers and we will continue now. That is the amended motion that's been agreed by the proposer and seconder. So that's the one that we're looking at now. So Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I represent an urban ward in the centre of Basingstoke. And what are we saying? That we protect parts of the borough and not other parts of the borough? Where is the fairness in the process in this that everyone else has been talking about? I think there needs to be a process. There needs to be an analysis. And we need to understand what's really driving this. And that's the reality of government housing figures. We would not be in this bind if we weren't having to find land to build houses at the rate we are being demanded of by government. And I think it is a point that no matter how you try and reword this thing now that's in front of us this evening, that bigger debate about the spatial strategy, about how we truly handle that volume of development and see if we genuinely can resist it, because I believe we should. Because who are we building these houses for, in the sense of, are we truly housing those people in our borough in need in the way that we choose and need to? Or are we becoming a dormitory for other places? The context of all of this is really important. I think it's difficult to have this debate when we're seeing a decision to dump on other communities at the moment to try and somehow get our 5-year housing land supply back. There's a blind panic over the 5-year housing land supply, and with good reason. But that doesn't mean that you dump on Bramley and you dump on other communities to get it back. I think there's a context to our neighbourhood plans whereby we value them and we think they're incredibly important. But if we choose of this council's decisions to sidestep those plans because they don't suit us in that decision-making process, then we undermine and contradict ourselves. So I think there's an awful lot in this that needs to be very carefully unpacked. And any decision in support of the motion this evening, what that risks necessarily is unintended consequences that we all don't want. And I know Mark doesn't want this. I know he's protecting his area. He feels strongly about it. I get it. We all do. But how we do development in Basingstoke has got to be far better and more thought through than a motion amended on the hoof tonight at full council. We've got to be better than this and how we do this. And we have to protect our villages and we have to protect our towns from overdevelopment. We are seeing that in Overton and in Whitchurch and in Bramley and in all those other communities as well at the moment. We also need to protect our urban area as well, because we don't want huge blocks of flats. We do not want overdevelopment in the centre of the town either. We want places that people can live, that we can be proud of passing as a planning authority. That's what matters to us. It really, really does. And the policy framework fits around that as well, that we set down the standards that we want to see. So I get the laudable motion in the sense of what you're trying to do. I just think it's wrong to do it on the hoof tonight in this way, right before an election, right before you start necessarily setting off a competition between groups of people in different communities around the borough who will say, we should be designated, not them over there. We deserve better than that group over there. If we start going down that road this early in this process, then we risk pitting groups and towns and villages and communities against each other. And that would be very wrong. So I just think that we should just draw breath here and think about this before jumping in 2 feet first. And I know the other argument to this is about Manydown and those other publicly owned pieces of land that have not come forward for all the various reasons, but they haven't come forward. And that's the problem, isn't it?
If Many Down had been delivered on the timescales that we'd wanted it to be delivered on, we wouldn't be having this conversation in the first place. But we are. So let's not rush it, and let's please, let's not do a disservice to our borough as a whole by rushing at this. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Madam Mayor, can I, on a point of order, and on the council rules of procedure 8.12, motions which may be moved during debate, I move E to adjourn a debate. Thank you.
One moment, please.
I'm happy to second that.
Thank you, Jane.
Right, thank you very much. Sorry, I had to get some advice there. We are running late, and I would allow people to carry on speaking, but there's been a proposer. Can't remember who it was now. Who proposed that? Councillor Tristan Robinson. Sorry, thank you. And
I'll second it.
And I heard Councillor Jane Frankham seconding it, and that is to adjourn this debate. I think there is a sense that we're rushing something that needs to be looked at a little bit more clearly. And so I think probably we're going to have to go to a recorded vote for this, a proper vote, because not everyone will want this. So can I ask Fiona, please, to take a vote on to adjourn this debate? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So it's for adjourning, against adjourning, or abstaining. Councillor Ashfield.
For adjourning.
Councillor Bean.
For adjourning.
Councillor Michael Bound.
For.
Councillor Simon Bound.
Definitely for.
Councillor Carruthers.
For.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Cousins.
For.
Councillor Cubitt.
Abstain.
Councillor Eachus.
For.
Councillor Edwards.
Definitely for.
Councillor Faulkner.
For.
Councillor Jane Frankham.
Absolutely for.
Councillor Paul Frankham.
For.
Councillor Freeman.
For.
Councillor Frost.
For.
Councillor Gardner.
Abstain.
Councillor Gaskell.
For.
Councillor George.
For.
Councillor Harvey.
For adjourning.
Councillor Hickling.
For.
Councillor Hussey.
Abstain.
Councillor Isaac.
For.
Councillor Gavin James.
Abstain.
Councillor Laura James.
For.
Councillor Konieczko.
Abstain.
Councillor Kinnear.
For.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Leeks.
For.
Councillor Lovegrove.
For.
Councillor McCormick.
Abstain.
Councillor Mackay.
Abstain.
Councillor Mahaffey.
Abstain.
Councillor Miller. Councillor Miller.
Say again, for.
4, thank you. Councillor Phillimore.
For.
Councillor Potter.
For.
Councillor Putty.
Abstain.
Councillor Regan.
Abstain.
Councillor Reid. Councillor Reid. I'll come back. Councillor Rattigan.
For abstention, for deferment.
Councillor Nick Robinson.
Definitely for.
Councillor Tristan Robinson.
Definitely for.
Councillor Raphael.
Abstain.
Councillor Sanders.
For as quickly as possible, please.
Councillor Still.
Definitely for.
Councillor Diane Taylor.
For.
Councillor Kim Taylor.
For.
Councillor Mark Taylor.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Tilbury.
For.
Councillor Tomlin.
For.
Councillor Vox.
For.
Councillor Watts.
For.
Councillor Janet Westbrook.
For.
Councillor Michael Westbrook.
For adjournment.
Councillor Wooldridge.
For.
Can I just check if Councillor Reid is there? I understand she's not present. Thank you. Thank you. For the adjournment is 42 and the abstentions were 11.
Thank you very much. So that is carried. We've had a good discussion to start this debate and we have voted to adjourn it for a future revisit. Thank you very much. Well, moving on, we've got just 2 more motions to go. The next one, item 16 on the agenda, is a motion on the subject of sports facilities in the borough.
Sorry.
Oh,
Madam
sorry. It's 9:30. Yeah. Are we happy to forge ahead until the end? Anybody wants to raise their hands if they aren't prepared to allow this? Okay. Okay, so we suspend standing orders and forge ahead now. We're not too far off. Thank you very much. So the motion on the subject of sports facilities in the borough, Councillor Cousins, you're proposing this.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, amongst much of the things that I missed throughout this pandemic, I miss sport. I miss coaching my son's football team. I miss playing tennis at Stratton Park. I miss watching cricket at Oakley, and I miss hearing the oohs and ahs at Kingsclear Bowling Club. I miss the silence that descends at Downgrange when the kicker lines up his conversion attempt and the bang of the starting pistol at the athletics track. Sport is an incredibly powerful tool that can not only help children develop both physically and mentally and help them with their life skills, but it keeps all of our residents healthy, and even older residents help stave off loneliness by giving them opportunities to meet, talk, and even compete with their peers. Whilst there are no guarantees that we would be approved this grant, the Levelling Up Fund gives us an opportunity to improve grassroots sports across our borough and create Basingstoke as a bastion for sport. It gives us the chance to look across our whole borough and talk to the wide variety of sports teams and facilities providers, work cooperatively and to make whole-scale improvements. As well as grassroots sports, we should also speak to the ice rink users, the Bison and Basingstoke Town Football Club, and include them in the conversation and application process. The issues and concerns with the rink are well noted, and indeed they still need resolving. I'd like to remind members that back in July 2019, it was only myself and my colleague, Councillor Mike Westbrook, who publicly stated that should the rink, temporary or permanent, need a new home, the land identified in our ward would have our full support. And Madam Mayor, it still does to this day. The football club is now playing back in the town, but we need to listen to them as well as listening to the concerns raised by Sport England in terms of how we can help them thrive and keep moving forward. Madam Mayor, I'd like to say finally that I'm grateful to Councillor Tristan Robinson for seconding this motion tonight, as it shows that there is genuine cross-party support to make improvements in sport across our borough. Looking at manifestos that have been released recently, I'm also pleased to see that my former colleagues express particular improvements to sports across the borough, including 100% support to both the ice rink and Basingstoke Town Football Club, and I hope they can support this motion too. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tristan Robinson, would you like to second it and then either speak or defer?
I will second it and defer my right to speak, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bean. Councillor Bean.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, can you hear me? I'm having connection issues.
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, great. Sorry, it keeps glitching, so hopefully you can hear what I'm about to say. So as a council, we are committed to sports and leisure across the borough and supporting our sports clubs and the important work they do in helping our residents to stay active. We've invested significantly in sports and leisure with over 8.6 million invested in sports facilities across the borough since 2000. We also continue to invest with £600,000 allocated for improvements to Downgrade Sports Complex over this coming year. Our vision is to have an enhanced infrastructure of facilities and a strong network of people that support participation in sport and recreation activity. The council has a strategic plan for sport and recreation which runs until 2025 to ensure residents have access to a range of facilities that meet their needs now and in the future. This plan allows us, alongside partners, to make informed decisions about future provision and provides a clear justification to secure external investment alongside evidence of local need. Officers are tasked with identifying national funding opportunities which may become available, and where there is opportunity to do so, will routinely assess the likely viability of applications from the council. As part of the budget, the government announced a number of relevant investment funds, the 4.8 billion Levelling Up Fund and the 150 million Community Ownership Fund, each fund having very specific and unique criteria. Through the Levelling Up Fund, the government has prioritised areas for investment based on a range of socio-economic factors. This fund aims to support smaller transport projects, town centre and high street regeneration, and support to maintain and expand cultural and heritage assets, including sports facilities. It's important to note that Basingstoke and Deane has been allocated as one of the lowest priority areas. Applications for this funding will be considered on factors such as deliverability, value for money, and strategic importance to the area. And to be successful, the application would need to be of exceptionally high quality to attract funding from higher priority areas. The £150 million Community Ownership Fund has been created to ensure communities can continue to benefit from local facilities and community assets. This fund allows community groups to bid for up to £250,000 match funding to help them buy a community asset at risk of being lost as a community owner. In exceptional cases, more match funding can be made available up to the value of £1 million. The assessment for this funding will focus on priority areas, deliverability, strategic importance, and value for money, and the social and economic and environmental benefits of bids. The council is unable to bid for this funding, and applications must be made by community groups. It is important that we take a strategic view and consider our greater ambitions for the long-term future of sports and leisure in the borough alongside our council plan priorities to ensure our work, along with the work of partners, makes the biggest difference to residents' lives. Alongside this, we also need to consider opportunities to apply for the Levelling Up Fund to support our work to shape the future of the borough, including high-quality homes, infrastructure and sports and leisure, as well as supporting the borough's economic recovery. We are awaiting more guidance on both funds, and as part of our work to sports clubs and community organisations across the borough, we will continue to keep them updated and help them to identify external funding opportunities for the benefit of residents, and therefore I am happy to support the motion this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Koniesko.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to support this motion too. I was at the EPH meeting the day after the budget, and I asked officers at the time to look into the possibility of using some of the new funding announced by the Chancellor for our football club and ice hockey club. By the sounds of what Councillor Bean has just said, some of that work is already being undertaken, which is good. But I think making the request more broadly to a broader range of clubs at all levels via a motion can only help with that. So this motion has my full support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Watts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When I listened to the budget, I heard the Chancellor announce he was going to give a £3 billion for a summer rescue package to summer sports, similar to the winter sports, which allowed amateur football and grassroots football and sports to continue during the winter. And he announced the same for the summer for those sports, giving them to the governing sports bodies. So when this motion, I looked up the Levelling Up Fund, and it states that local authorities have been invited to work with groups in their areas to develop bids up to 20 million for projects focused on improving transport infrastructure, regeneration and regenerating town centres, and maintaining cultural assets. It doesn't mention grassroots sports clubs to improve facilities. I mean, I've gone through the document a couple of times, and it mentions upgrading athletics facilities once. Its whole emphasis is on revitalising local economies by boosting growth. It mentions transport investment. It talks about public transport, talks about bridge repairs, bus priorities, road improvements, regeneration of the town, and etc. Cultural investment. So I believe if we did pass this motion, we'd be doing a misservice to all the local clubs in Basingstoke and Dean, because we were giving them false hope, like Ramsdale Cricket Club would get a new cricket pavilion, because it's just not going to happen. The criteria from the government is that the most deprived areas in the country will be the first priority. And we're Basingstoke and Dean, we have pockets of deprivation, but we will be in category 3. So we are inviting all our sports clubs to put bids in, and it's not going to happen. I think we as a council should be working with Hampshire County Council with the support of our 3 MPs, because it emphasises in this particular scheme that we need to get support of our MPs, and we can submit 3 bids because we've got 3 MPs, I think, for the whole of Basingstoke and Dean. I'm sure somebody can correct me if I got those figures wrong. So we should be working to look to get a rapid transport scheme, which members have discussed in the past, up at the M3 junction. We should be not asking our local sports teams to spend amounts of time that they haven't, because most of them will be struggling to maintain playing sport in the next year, because we don't know where we are. I mean, I still play cricket. I mean, Basingstoke is a thriving cricket club, but there's lots of villages out there that will be struggling. They didn't play last season. We played a few games, and we don't know where those villages teams are going to come back. And to say, well, you can put a bid to government, they're going to give you a new pavilion, it's just not fair. This Levelling Up Fund was not designed to bail out this council's shortcomings over the football club and the ice rink. So as it is at the moment, I should not be supporting it, because it's wasting everybody's time and it's not going to get off the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Perhaps the proposer and seconder can come back on the points made at the end when they speak again. We'll just hear from our last 2 speakers. before then. Next is Councillor Kim Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to admit that I got quite excited when I first saw this motion, particularly having received emails from Basingstoke Sports Council about the fact that, you know, they were now in some difficulty, they hadn't received their grants from the council, and given the vast amount of good work they do at that kind of grassroots level. So I thought, well, it'd be really interesting to see what the prospectus has to say, what it's for, how you make the bid, how we would be assessed. You know, could this help this group of people together with all the other grassroots sports? And unfortunately, I had to arrive at the same conclusion as Councillor Watts, having read it. It really isn't designed for this purpose. I mean, I really wish it was, but I think it isn't. And I think that there are a lot of people, particularly groups like the ice rink users group, who have been working really hard, and they put in masses and masses of time into trying to promote their sport and to try to get help and funding for their sport. And I just don't feel that we should be, you know, giving false hope. I mean, I would almost prefer that this motion gets withdrawn until we can actually seek clarification about whether or not it is a suitable mechanism for grassroots sports, because I honestly just don't think it is. I'm really sorry, having read that, I just drew that conclusion. I honestly wish it was.
Thank you. Councillor Jane Frankham.
Yes, thank you. Well, I'm as confused as Councillor Kim Taylor and others. I obviously, as I was the mayor, and surely Madam Mayor, you on occasions we went to the Festival of Sport. There's nothing about trying to help our Basingstoke voluntary sport group. In fact, they've made an application for a grant and have been turned down. I just couldn't believe it. I thought that Kevin Lang was joking. I'm very, very disappointed. I think we've got to support our local sports people. We've got people that have gone through from amateur right through to winning gold medals in the Olympics. And this doesn't help them or that group at all. And I agree, perhaps we should take it back and have a look and see, is it what we want for this borough? Because after all, at the end of the day, the most important thing, above all your ecology, above all your green this and green that, is people and their well-being. And sports is a very, very important part. So I can't support this. I would prefer that maybe it goes back and it's looked back. I realise I won't be a councillor then. So this is my last heartfelt appeal. Let's put people first, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor McCormick, you're our last speaker. Fairly brief, please, before we go to the seconder. Thank you.
Yeah, I would be happy, if I'm honest with you, for this to be deferred, because I'm really uncomfortable about this idea that we've got a motion that's saying, oh, look, let's support the ice rink and the football club. We vote for this motion, and then it doesn't actually do what it says on the tin. Where I'm coming from with this is that we, as a council, if we need to get external funding to help us do it to save the ice rink and the football club, great. But what does this motion actually achieve? Is it actually going to get the funding that we think it is from the Levelling Up Fund? And I don't think it is. And from that point of view, it seems to me to be quite a disingenuous motion. And I think we should have it deferred until we get the opportunity to have these options explained. And it could be that some of us, myself included, might not be here next time. But I don't want to vote for a motion that sets the hopes so high of some of our sports facilities, and then we find that we can't deliver on it because of government constraints.
Thank you. Councillor Tristan Robinson, do you want to speak as now as seconder?
Yes, please, Madam Mayor. Every single councillor in our borough is committed to sport, be it the football of Councillors Taylor and Phillimore, the running of Councillor Bean, the tennis of Councillor Vox, or the cycling of Councillor Raffel. Myself, I've competed for Team GB 3 times in motorcycle endurance racing. Sport is in our borough's DNA. At the budget just 3 weeks ago, the government announced a levelling up fund, allowing local authorities to bid for up to 20 million for cultural, including sports facilities. What better way to build back better than to secure funding for a new sports hub for the whole of Basingstoke and Deane? We all have our own sports projects we care passionately about. Indeed, for many of us, it occupies most of our lives. So let's work with all the sports groups across the borough, from Basingstoke Town Community Football Club, to the Basingstoke Bisons and the ice rink users, to lacrosse and everything in between, to pitch our vision to turn Basingstoke into a centre of sports excellence. We have major developments coming forward, and what better way to plan for the future than with landmark new sports facilities? And to those who say it won't happen or it cannot be done, what should we do? Not try? Not jump on the opportunities that present themselves to us? In the Levelling Up prospectus, under 4.13, it says, and I quote, "Projects submitted for appraisal under this investment theme may include upgrading and creating new cultural and creative spaces, including sports or athletics facilities." You may think it's unachievable, or you might disagree with it. But one thing is for sure, absolutely nothing will be achieved if we do not try. We are here as representatives to try and affect a better future for Basingstoke and Deane, not to continue to talk our town down and not to do things because we're afraid we might fail. We must stand up for our borough. We must seize the opportunity, bring the whole of sports together and to try. Let us just try to build a brighter Basingstoke and Deane. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Cousins, last few words from you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I want to thank members for their contributions tonight. I have to say that when I approached Councillor Robinson with this, we did actually go and seek senior officer clarification. Was this the right fund that we should be looking for? And could we include what we wanted to do? And we were given that assurance that what we were doing was in the right frame and the right spirit and with the right intentions, which is why it is here before us tonight. I have to say I'm incredibly disappointed with my former colleagues, to the point where I can pretty much almost say your manifesto now is meaningless, because when push comes to shove and the difficult choices come where you have the opportunity to apply for a fund, to take the chance, take the punt, have a go, you're prepared to say, no, we're not interested, sit idly by and let somebody else potentially take what we could have had. I'm sorry, that is not acceptable. You're here to represent your residents. Sport is powerful and sport has incredible meaning to everybody in this borough, and you are prepared to sit idly by and not do anything. That is disrespectful to our residents, and it's frankly quite disgraceful that you will put something in writing and then do another thing when it comes to the final element of doing so. Madam Mayor, I want to end on a high note. I want to end on a quote from one of my own personal sporting heroes, Sir Bobby Robson. When he talks about sport, he says this: "It's the noise, the passion, the feeling of belonging, the pride in your city. It's a small boy clambering up the stadium steps for the very first time, gripping his father's hand, gawping at that hallowed stretch of turf beneath him, and without being able to do a thing about it, fall in love." That could quite easily apply to the ice rink. It could apply to the tennis courts. It could apply to the rugby pitches. It could apply even to older residents of the bowls club and the cricket grounds as well. Councillors, do not sit idly by. Be bold, be brave, be ambitious, and vote for this motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And Madam Mayor, can I also call for a recorded vote, please?
You can indeed, and we will now go straight to the vote because I
Sorry,
think
Madam Mayor, but I want to refute what he's saying. That is not what I said at all.
Okay, thank you, noted. Right.
Madam Mayor, a point of personal clarification and possibly a point of order as well. I'm extremely disappointed that the mover of this motion has seemed to personally attack members of our group and infer that our manifesto is meaningless. At least we got a manifesto. And where was the mover when we were talking to the football club about their plans, number one, to go to Winkelbury, number two, to relocate to Camrose? So
excuse me, I'm going to interrupt Councillor McCormack. We're getting into political ping pong ball now. And
well, I think what's been said tonight is not correct, and I think the record should be put straight.
Okay,
and all I asked for was a deferral. I didn't say I was going to outright reject it. I didn't say.
Thank you. You said that, and we've heard it. Thank you. But we are now going to go to the vote, and I will ask Fiona to see to that, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If you could indicate whether you're for the motion, against the motion, or you're abstaining. Councillor Ashfield.
For.
Councillor Bean.
For.
Councillor Michael Bound.
For.
Councillor Simon Bound.
For.
Councillor Carruthers.
For.
Councillor Cooper.
Abstain.
Councillor Cousins.
For.
Councillor Cubitt.
For.
Councillor Eachus.
Simply because it names the football club.
You're
just
not
be
going
on
to
the safe
vote.
side, I'll abstain or just not vote. I don't. It's sport in general, but I just think I need to be careful.
I'll record it as a no vote. Councillor Edwards.
For.
Councillor Faulkner.
For.
Councillor Jane Frankham.
It's not what I said. I completely refute it, so I will abstain.
Councillor Paul Frankham.
Abstain.
Councillor Freeman.
Abstain on the grounds that it's not clear whether this fund is appropriate at all, and I think we should be re-looking at it when we can get some clarification. Abstain.
Councillor Frost.
For.
Councillor Gardner.
For.
Councillor Gaskell.
For.
Councillor George.
For.
Councillor Harvey.
For.
Councillor Hickling.
For.
Councillor Hussey.
For.
Councillor Isaac.
For.
Councillor Gavin James.
For, but only because I'm in favour.
Councillor Laura James.
For.
Councillor Kuzniewsko.
For.
Councillor Kinnear.
For.
Councillor Jones.
Abstain, considering it seems like the election's already started.
Councillor Leeks.
For.
Councillor Lovegrove.
For.
Councillor McCormick.
For, and we remain convinced that we deliver on it.
Councillor Mackay.
For.
Councillor Mahaffey.
For.
Councillor Miller.
For.
Councillor Phillimore. Or...
I have to abstain. I declared an interest.
Okay, no vote. Councillor Potter.
For.
Councillor Putty.
For, and I also want the deficit to for ladies sport to be remedied.
Councillor Regan.
Abstain.
Councillor Rattigan.
For.
Councillor Nick Robinson.
For.
Councillor Tristan Robinson.
Try and perhaps fail, but do not fail to try. For.
Councillor Raphael.
For.
Councillor Sanders. Councillor Sanders there?
Yeah, sorry for it. The system wasn't working.
Oh, thank you. Councillor Still.
For.
Councillor Diane Taylor.
For.
Councillor Kim Taylor.
Oh, sorry. I will vote for, but I would actually like some confirmation that this is an appropriate fund before officers who are already hard pushed actually start doing work.
Councillor Mark Taylor.
Abstain.
Councillor Tilbury.
For.
Councillor Tomlin.
For.
Councillor Vox.
4.
Councillor Watts.
Abstain.
Councillor Janet Westbrook.
4.
Councillor Michael Westbrook.
100% for.
Councillor Wooldridge.
4.
Thank you. Thank you. The votes were 42 in favour and 8 abstentions.
Thank you very much. So that motion is carried, along with the innovation of voting with speeches, which was nice. But not again, please. The final motion of the day, of the evening, is returning to the subject of housing green conversion. Just be aware that it is similar to the subject explored at item 10 on eco-housing, so let's not repeat ourselves. Proposer, Councillor McCormick, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be very brief. I'm conscious of the time. It's been mentioned before about how much of our emissions, 25%, come from housing. The vast majority of the houses that we have in Basingstoke and Deane will need conversion between now and 2010 in order to make them carbon neutral. And then we need to go above and beyond that with other sources of emission to make the borough truly carbon neutral. I have actually had communications from the chief executives of the 2 housing associations named. I would quite happily work with other housing associations to identify pilot estates or houses that we can work on. But as we've heard earlier tonight, we really do need a sense of urgency now in delivering on our objectives to achieve carbon neutrality. And I think, as we're not a stockholder now, but our stock was transferred to these 2 housing associations, it makes sense that we work closely with them. They have aspirations to make their housing stock carbon neutral. They're going about it in slightly different ways, but it's different paths up the same mountain. So there's obviously a lot of stock that needs converting to grade D or better in the first instance, and then we've got other innovations that we would like to see, like boilers removed, solar panels, home batteries, car charging ports, that sort of thing. But all this requires investment, and it also requires know-how. So if we get a couple of pilots going, we can hopefully learn all the mistakes early and then have some economies of scale afterwards. And we have private owners in the same estates that have had stock that they've bought who could benefit from the experience of the housing associations. And I think it is really important that we do progress on this because we're running out of time. We say it's 9 years, but that's not a lot of time when you're looking at converting 60,000 houses. So we've got to make a start. We've got to make a start quickly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is being seconded by Councillor Mackay. Would you like to second and either speak or defer?
Yes, I'd be delighted to second the motion, and I'll take the risk of making a few points now. It's a very important motion, and I just draw members' attention to the fact that it's extremely consistent with the climate strategy that we agreed earlier this evening. And I draw people's attention to item 217 in the action plan, which highlights the existing housing stock as a subject, and this motion seeks to put some flesh on those bones and, most importantly, urges us to act. The consultants WSP attended the climate map just a few days ago and noted just how many buildings there are in the borough. They mentioned a figure of 170,000. I can only assume that is buildings and not just houses. And these are in a multiplicity of ages, styles and ownership. And in scale, they dwarf the new developments that are planned. So with less than 9 years until 2030, we've really got to act soon on this extremely complex issue. And let's identify those pilot projects quickly. That's the key. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mackay. Councillor Tristan Robinson.
About 10 words, Madam Mayor, which is to say all the points that we raised in the previous debate are valid. I welcome this motion, and I think it's really important that when we do have the subsequent debate at EPH, we look to include all registered providers in Basingstoke and Dean, not just Vivid and Sovereign, to make sure it's all encompassing, because there are a significant number of other registered providers who we should be working with, and indeed already are working with on this important issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, I'll try to be brief. I wanted to obviously support the motion and the intent behind it and the detail that will go with it as well, because I think when we built the Oak Ridge Village back in 2002, when it came through, one of the biggest selling points was the insulation of the homes that led to massive reductions in the energy costs that residents were facing. And that idea of trying to deal with fuel poverty, which is still a very real issue that many of our residents face in many of the older homes in our borough, is very, very relevant as part of this debate, because regeneration of homes has to be more than just simply the rebuilding of the fabric. It's the fabric you build it with. And in this context, what I'm interested in terms of the debate we will have at EPH, is how we see regeneration in our borough. Vivid, the other RPs being on board is really important, but they may only own 40% of a street. How you get regeneration to then deal with the whole of that street so that you can do regeneration that will provide homes for the future, long-term future, that are of very high environmental standards becomes part of the debate as well. It's how we see regeneration, that we help our RPs do what they can do, and we achieve perhaps the ambition we want that goes with it for all those other properties. And I can think about that across in lots of different wards, about how the various makeup of RP ownership and private ownership and other ownerships and so on becomes part of this mosaic, if you like, trying to piece it together. So as Councillor Mackay says, it's an incredibly complicated issue, and I agree it really is one that we need to grapple. So I'll be supporting the motion and we'll look forward to the debate at EPH.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jones, let's try again.
Oops, hang about. Am I unmuted?
You are. We can hear you. We can hear what you're saying as well.
Well, I wouldn't say too much about that one. Yeah, actually, Councillor Harvey's just hit on where I was going to come from. We've been talking for years, especially in my ward, about regeneration and doing different things. And we, if I'm honest, we dragged our heels for years. We put it off, can't get our partners on board. We need to start doing that and actually looking at most of our housing estates, which were ex-council, 50% or more are privately owned. But those people can't afford to replace their boilers. We as a council should be looking at giving grants and things like that, and making sure, and the fabric of the houses as well. Sometimes need looking at, we ought to try and be looking at how we can do it, not just with our partners, but as a borough. And also our community centres. This is one of the things I've been on about for ages, that we don't seem, it all comes down to, have you got any money to put forward? Well, our community centre hasn't, so we don't get anything. So we need to look at this a lot closer than just saying what a great idea it is. You've got to get people on board and get us as a council on board, not just keep on looking at cost. Look at the end result. But I will obviously be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tilbury.
Sorry, I moved across the screen. You find yourself chasing yourself around. It's like celebrity squares. Yeah, I support this motion. I mean, the point I was going to make, and I was tempted to make it on the earlier motion, we used to be in the vanguard of eco housing. We built, the Foxtown estate in Overham was built by this council on land it owned, you know, water heating, solar panels on the roof, high levels of insulation, which are normal now, but weren't in those days. Rainwater harvesting, great. They did grey water recycling on the flats, which was an absolute disaster. And I wouldn't recommend that to anyone, but most of the other things worked, you know, and we were able to do that then. It did require some subsidy. The other thing is going back, you know, again, years ago, Kingfisher Housing Association, before Sovereign, I recall when I was on their board, which was around about sort of 2006, 2005, that sort of era, they actually retrofitted these sort of things on a house. I think it was in South Ham as a sort of eco home, one of the old red brick council houses from the 1950s. And they also built 2 other eco homes out in the countryside where they, you know, where there was no mains gas and anything like that. So, you know, this sort of thing was being done years ago, and we just seem to have stopped. And, you know, new developments, it's always jam tomorrow, you know, with many down, you know, jam tomorrow, but never jam today. And we need to get on. I think Councillor Jones have made the point about grants. I mean, Hampshire are running quite a good scheme at the moment for solar panels, and they're trying to promote that as a sort of, you know, Hampshire-wide thing. And that's the sort of thing we could do. We've got millions of pounds tied up in poor investments that's earning no money. If we want to help people in this borough, we should be doing something with that money that's useful, rather than chasing low rates of interest from one place to another. You know, we've got the money to do that. We can improve people's homes and get on and do it at a scale that works, because most of these other sort of schemes just don't work. The government scheme, you know, they lauded last year with, if you try and actually get a new boiler or anything like that, all the hurdles you have to jump. I've looked at it myself. It's virtually impossible to do. It needs to be done at a much more local level, and, you know, on sort of pilot schemes in the States where you can do this sort of thing. The ground source heat pumps, you know, deep hole boring works well. If you can get the bore in, do loads of them at the same time, you know, and then you've basically got free heat effectively. But, you know, if you do it piecemeal, it's very expensive. If you get the bore in and do the whole estate, you know, and share the pipe works, because, you know, you can do all this sort of thing, it works. But someone's got to, you know, actually get on and do something about this. We keep talking about it, and we used to do it. We've gone from being in the vanguard to being in the guards van, and unfortunately, you know, we don't seem to be going anywhere with this, and we keep talking about it. So we need to get on with it. So I'm more than happy to support this motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. The last speaker is Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Very briefly, yes, I'll fully support this motion. I think it's got a lot of good features in here, but I think the big thing we've got is a great opportunity with respect to let somebody do it and let us all learn from it, capture it, and then become a centre of excellence for rolling this out to not just housing associations, but actually giving confidence to people in the borough and their ordinary homes. There'll be a model, the bugs may well have been fixed, and there'll be contractors available who've got experience. So I think it's got a great opportunity, and it's just what we want. And maybe we even can fund it from our potentially coming up carbon offset funding and whatever. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor McCormick, would you like to just sum up?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm conscious of the late hour. I think I'm pushing against an open door with this one. So I'll sum up and then we'll move to vote.
Okay, if that's it. I'm sensing it's favourable, but I will obviously give opportunity. If anybody is dissenting and is not in favour of this motion, would you raise your virtual hands now, please? Okay, thank you. So that motion is carried. Thank you very much. Just before we move on, I just would like to make a slight correction to the vote on the last motion, item 16. It should be 43 for, 8 against, and not, as was said, 42 for and 8 against. So, sorry, abstention. Oh, sorry, not 8 against, 8 abstentions, sorry. 43 for, 8 abstentions. Thank you. Right, moving on to the last page. Item 18 on the agenda, questions from members of the council on notice. We have none. Item 19, to receive the minutes of the meetings listed on the agenda. There are just 2 this time. So are there any questions on these, please? Councillor McCormick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's just on the cabinet. I don't think we've got any minutes yet from it, but I'm just looking at the cabinet papers. Item 5, supporting living initiative for 180 Colville Road. So I asked some questions on the night, and I was expecting some written answers, in particular about the consideration of the alternative venues and the criteria applied and why they didn't find out. I just wanted to ask the portfolio holder where we're at with those answers, because I'd very much like to receive them before we all break up for the elections.
If I can jump in, Madam Mayor,
I
will take that one in the sense that I have the answers and I will send them to him in approximately 5 minutes' time, if that's okay.
Is that fine? Yes, we've got a thumbs up.
Apologies.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions? No, right. In that case, we have no reason to exclude the present public, although I expect they've gone to bed already, as we have no confidential or exempt items. So all that remains is for me to say farewell to all those who are leaving us, and to the rest of us. We'll see some of you at the mayor making on the 20th of May, depending, of course, on the elections. And I declare this meeting of the council over. Thank you. And
well done, Mayor.
Yes.
Well done, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.